You don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Dead up perfect in the kid. Got a billion who take on my head. Got a better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper than
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the second part of What If Deku and Hero Academia joins One Punch Man. Special note, this fanfic is written in a masterpiece of Lumpe Spark 3 on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Aizawa, having fully recollected himself, turned his attention back to the battle or lack thereof battle at hand. He was surprised to see that everything appeared to be normal again. The damage that had been done to the school was gone, and the undoubtedly burning smell that signaled fire close was replaced by the normal breeze. He turned back to his friend and asked, "Did you do all this?" A look of surprise on his face. "Well, I guess you can say that I am pretty awesome, you know, or have you forgotten?" Ojiro said with a laugh, scratching the back of his head. Before Aizawa could inquire further, a sharp screeching came from behind him. Just from the way it sounded, he knew exactly who it was. His friend, helping him turn around to face the sound, was in no surprise to see President Mike at the school gate looking at the two of them, wide-eyed and open-mouthed. He sprinted up to them and talked so fast that it was mostly undecipherable, but the general theme was surrounding Ojiro and what happened here. Aizawa raised his hand to stop his friend from talking and asked he can explain later. "What of the families and the dorm area?" Slowly removing his hand after finishing. "It's crazy. Everything has just been fixed like nothing had happened in the first place. We managed to get most of the families away to safety before many injuries could mount up. The other teachers are doing a head count just in case someone is missing." Yamada replied, "Now what about you? What happened here and how are you back?" he said, looking towards Aizawa and Ojiro. Aizawa, going first, said, "A similar situation here to yours, I can only assume. I was blind for most of the encounter, but by the time it wore off, all I could see was this guy and everything being peaceful again. My students should be." A moment of panic set upon Aizawa's face. He looked around and spotted his broken leg and quickly used his scarf to grab it and reattach it to his leg. Now standing upright on his own, he panned around his surroundings, searching for his students. Yamada asked about what he was looking for, but before he could, another scream came from the left side of the building. The single word was clear as day to anyone: SHOTO. The sound of his students sent Aizawa immediately into action, running towards the angry scream. Once he broke the corner, he was relieved and confused to see Shoto Todoroki's body was still fine, although what confused him was that surrounding the boy's body was what appeared to be a circular dark purple field of energy that suspended the boy 2 meters into the air. The boy's father was trying to reach in and pull the boy out, but the bubble reacted and the purple energy shot out and forced him back onto a knee. He noticed a group coming from around the corner, more specifically one individual that reminded him of Kurogiri, and looking back at the barrier currently surrounding his son, he noticed the similarities between the two and menacingly marched towards the group. Completely bypassing most of the group, Endeavor stopped in front of the stranger and hoisted him up by his shirt. Are you the one responsible for this?" he said, pointing towards his son. The others around him tried telling him to relax or set the guy down, but their pleas fell on deaf ears. Maybe," the strange man replied. Endeavor's flames flared to his answer and he began to spout flames in his other hand and held it up threateningly. "I'll give you 3 seconds to rephrase that," he said, drawing the flame closer and closer to the stranger's face, until suddenly it disappeared. All of his flames did. Dropping the man, he turned to see Eraserhead's quirk activated. "Calm down, Endeavor. We're just as confused as you are with what's happening right now. What happened to the Namu?" Hardening his gaze, Endeavor answered, "We had managed to finally knock the beast unconscious. They're more intelligent than the last few we seen boarding on near sentience. We wanted to try and see if we could extract some information from it, but suddenly a massive black energy surged from out of nowhere and absorbed everything around us. I couldn't see anything for some time until it turned white and retracted back to here, seemingly restoring everything that had been damaged back to how it was originally. The wave retreated to here, where I found Shoto like that." "How did that happen?" Aizawa shut off his quirk and replied calmly, "That's what we're trying to figure out as well. The other students' whereabouts are also a concern of mine. But we have to be cautious here. We don't want to make the situation worse." At that moment, Hawks had flown down looking exhausted. As he landed, he staggered for a moment before speaking. "I spotted multiple other bubbles like this one scattered around the place." He looked at Aizawa and grimaced, judging by the looks of it, Midoriya and the rest of his class seemed to be contained inside of them. The news shook Aizawa to his core. On one hand, his class were all accounted for and safe, if you could call it that, but how would he be able to free them, and how and why did they become captured in the first place? So many questions waged through his mind, but before he could entertain them, he wanted his class secured safely. He looked to Hawks and asked, "Do you know if they can be moved?" The Hawk hero simply shook his head. "No, it seems any force that acts upon it, the barrier lashes out with equal amount to remove it." Aizawa was concerned about having his students scattered and potentially vulnerable to attack. He turned to Ojiro, who through his mist-like features made it impossible to discern his mood. "Do you think that you can move it? What Endeavor described sounds familiar to what happened to you during our visit to Tartarus, just on a larger scale." Ojiro hesitated for a moment before nodding and walking towards the student contained in the field. He reached his hands out and the mist of his body joined the bubble and synced ever so naturally in place. He shifted his arms and the bubble moved with him as if an extension of his own body. "Will you look at that? I guess I can," Ojiro said in excitement. Aizawa simply nodded, and the rest of the day was spent collecting the students and moving them to a secure area. Multiple people were still harmed in the attack, with complete memory of it happening judging from the reports filed by citizens and heroes alike. All for one, on the other hand, and any trace of the Nomus were all but gone, leaving only more questions than answers. They only gained one clue about the events that transpired during the day, and he was less than forthcoming. Aizawa and Yamada were both in an office facing their former friend, asking him questions about what happened. "So, let me get this straight. You can't tell us what the contents of this deal of yours were, nor who made this deal, or something will happen. You do understand how completely ridiculous that sounds, right?" Aizawa said. "I'm living proof. How else could you explain to me how I just magically came to my senses when I was gone for so long as Kurogiri?" Ojiro shouted in defiance. "Yeah, but it could have just been convenient timing for the most part. Maybe triggering your thoughts back then lead to a window for you to come through once you saw one of us in danger again." Yamada answered back. "Do you think I'm just holding those kids hostage for a laugh? An elaborate joke? Come on, you guys know me better than that," he said immediately. Aizawa stared at him as he began. "We knew you before, but now you're something else. We don't know if you are who you say you are, or a spy for OFA. There are a number of potential possibilities on what is true or not. But if you cannot speak of this deal, we will make guesses from given data, and you will nod your head if we are correct, and side to side if we're not." "Got it." Nodding in confirmation, Aizawa began. "Let's start with the students. Nowhere else in the city are we getting reports of people contained in bubbles. And given that I and Shinso were also in the epicenter near you, it's safe to assume that it wasn't proximity-based either. So this deal had a selection process." To that, Ojiro nodded. Yamada immediately started to write things down in a notebook. "So were the kids specifically targeted? Did you know of the people that would be selected?" Ojiro shook his head twice. "In my defense, I tried to ask, but it simply didn't tell me," Ojiro said. Again, Yamada started to write notes down. "So, 20 people for your body back, huh? Why 20 specifically? What were this creature's goals? If this creature truly even existed in the first place?" Aizawa wondered to himself. It seemed impossible to fathom such a being to exist. The restoration of the damages, was this a part of this deal? Ojiro sat in contemplation. He could just nod yes, but that wasn't entirely true. So he tempted fate and said not exactly, it was more a sweetener. Aizawa and Yamada both were surprised at this. Aizawa continued as Yamada wrote. "So you're saying it was a bonus, to make you accept? What about AFO and the Namu? Did this deal have anything to do with them?" Ojiro looked confused at his friend. The words echoed in his mind and were familiar yet new all at the same time. "Who and the what? Those words sound familiar, but I'm drawing a blank on what they mean." Aizawa was stunned while Yamada burst out, "Really? You are Kurogiri, you should have the most experience with them, especially since you brought them there. There goes the hope of using you for information on the villain's whereabouts." Aizawa silenced Mike and continued on. "So you don't share any of the memories you had while you Kurogiri? The Namu were black abominations created by AFO using modified humans. It's what he did to you to turn you into what you are now." Ojiro took a moment to look at his hands and see the shifting mist that made up his body. It was a light bluish color that resembled his hair when he was still himself. Thinking of all the damage the villains did using his body angered him, but also saddened him. All the pain and destruction he inadvertently caused, he was almost glad he didn't remember any of it. He spoke with a much more sour tone. "I don't remember them, but I've seen them during the attack through the creature's talk. No, the deal didn't have anything to do with them, Ike, where they could have gone." Aizawa perked up at this revelation. "So you're saying that this being showed what was happening here, everywhere, not just the events happening at the school?" The other heroes were fighting as well. It didn't look good. I didn't want anyone to die, knowing that I could have saved them. I gave my original life to save others, and I was offered to reclaim my life to save even more people, with the caveat of a few others. It seemed to be the best decision at the time. Aizawa sat there and let out a long exhale. He understood Oboro better than anyone, and that's exactly what he would have done in that situation. Always thinking of others over himself, he only had one more question to ask Oboro. Are my students safe? Not wanting to lie to his longtime friend, Oboro answered as truthfully as he could. I don't know. Midoriya Izuku's trial. Midoriya fluttered his eyes awake. The first thing he saw once his eyes cleared was the familiar sight of the bonfire and chairs that indicated that he was once again inside his vestige world. As he looked around and saw all the past users of OFA, but strangely none of them were looking at him but up above. Before he could ask about what's wrong, a strong deep voice resounded in not only his head but all of the vestiges' heads as well. Interesting, very interesting. One being that holds the souls of 7 others and another that is yet to be completed. This world's evolution took a surprising turn even for me. Midoriya scanned the area, trying to locate the speaker but being unable to decide to follow the other vestiges' lead, and looked up where he was shocked at what he saw. The normally pure black world of vestiges was eclipsed by a giant planet-looking object with a similar appearance to Jupiter's surface. Was that the source of this voice, he wondered. The voice came again. Before we begin, I find it only fair that everyone residing in this body gets its voice heard in the upcoming conversation. With that, the void world started to seemingly shake, the vibration so violent that caused Midoriya's eyes and head to spin. By the time that it stopped, he heard an impossible voice. My Midoriya. The voice came from All Might. His ghostly appearance was still apparent, but his body was fully formed, his blue eyes sharp and aware of his surroundings. All of the vestiges turned to look at the new voice. Shock filled all of their faces, especially Nana. Their eyes met again, student and teacher. Thousands of words filled Toshinori's mind on what he wanted to say to her, but all that came out first was sorry. I failed you and your grandson. Nana replied in a comforting voice, no, you didn't fail him or me. You did exactly as I asked of you, but I didn't see the flaws in my own plan. If only I'd done better, none of this would have happened. Midoriya, putting together what it meant for All Might to be here, blurted numerous questions. All Might, you died. What happened to everyone? Did AFO win and capture me? All Might quickly responds, no. Settle down, Midoriya. I was with Principal Nezel at the time as we were surveying the battle. We were trying to activate the 0-pointer's defenses to help in the battle, but before we could, a black wave of mist engulfed everyone. By the time I woke up, I couldn't see anything resembling the school, and then next thing I know, I'm here. Midoriya was relieved that All Might wasn't dead, but he also doesn't know what happened to everyone else either, which still caused him to worry. Before he could ask another question, the disembodied voice of the planet filled their heads once more. Excellent, now that we all are here, we can discuss the next chapter of events. Banjo was the first one to speak up. Oh yeah. And what the hell would that be? And what the hell are ya? Shinomori was surprisingly the first one to speak up. Hey, settling down. This thing, whatever it is not something you want to piss off. My danger sense is going crazy. If we weren't already dead and in a void, I would have already ran away. This guy's no joke. I haven't felt an aura this terrifying since All for One, and compared to this, I would take him any day. The voices range out in their heads again, interrupting their conversation. People call me savior, oppressor, god, devil, supreme being, and so on and so forth. These labels, however, I find worthless. I simply offer deals when they are needed, and I offer one to you, child. All attention was put on Midoriya. He didn't really understand what was happening, but he had a feeling it was not good, so he offered a simple question and response. And what deal would that be? The being replied almost instantaneously. Why, power, of course. Overwhelming power that cannot be matched. I saw the struggles that you were going through just as these souls have, and just like them, I can help you achieve your goal. You want to be strong enough to save everyone, to stop crime before anyone else is hurt, but the power you have now is not enough. You have personally seen its shortcomings and the consequences of them, but with my power added on, nothing would be able to stop you. As he said in the final sentence, the surface of the planet started to make shapes. It revealed an Earth-like world from the atmosphere, but the cloud formations were strange. There was a line that blew through it all, dispersing over the Earth. He continued, I can grant you power rivaling this, something that cannot be done with what you have now. The first user spoke up now. And what do we offer you in return? You sound very much like my brother, offering your hand in friendship while simultaneously holding a dagger in the other. Nothing but your undying loyalty to my cause, the eradication of quirks from your society. The quirk doomsday theory is very much real. As the generations continue onwards, the quirks will become more and more dangerous to control and regulate. The planets started to show their Earth, their worlds, Japan from the future. Destruction and panic reigned. Whole city blocks destroyed as what can only be described as monsters reigned overhead, battling each other. Your world has been on a timer since its very inception. The more you try to control it, the more cracks that slip through your fingers. The Yakuza you faced before understood this and made the cure to your situation, but due to the slow government it was too late to be implemented. The view zoomed out and showed the Earth rotating. Once green pastures all turned red or dark black, signaling the decay and chaos in those locations. But with my power you can save your world from this fate. The chaos brought by these new dangers can be bested by your new power. Think about it, I await your answer. As he said the last few words, the planet-like object display ceased and it vanished before their very eyes. No one said any words for the next 5 minutes, digesting the information given to them and the possibility of it being true or just an elaborate hoax. N was the next vestige to speak up. So, how many of us actually believe that crackpot of a story? Banjo quickly agreed. Yeah, that story seems incredibly stupid, and even if it were true, what does he expect us to do about it? Completely get rid of everyone's quirk. Does he think they will do that willingly? Nana responded, that's where the idea of giving us more power comes into play. I assume that with said power we would essentially stronghold everyone into getting their quirks removed or face the consequences. While I disagree entirely with such a method, if what he showed us was the future of our world, it would mean saving many lives later on. The second user chimed in, or it could just be one for all, playing tricks on us to surrender all for one to him willingly through this deal. He said it himself, it sounds like a plan his brother would make. He said, nodding towards the first. While I did say that, the things that were done seemed well out of my brother's current capabilities. If he still cannot control even Shigaraki, then doing something like this seems well impossible. He even brought Toshinori here without having to kill him. I don't think even he has so much knowledge as to do that. The first replied. They all turned to look at All Might, who was a golden being of fire reminiscent of a man. Given that it was his time to speak, he said, I too disagree. This doesn't seem like All for One's plan. We're dealing with something else entirely. The matter if that future it showed us was true or not doesn't matter. We don't need its power to stop AFO. I believe in Midoriya, he said, looking at the child. Midoriya was in the spotlight next. He sat there pondering on a great deal many things. Could this gift really be that powerful that Midoriya can save everyone? Is the future shown really how things will end for their world? Could he really stop AFO without this power? Midoriya spoke hesitantly at first. Maybe I should accept the deal. All the vestiges were shocked by this, while All Might's smile dropped into a depressed frown. I don't know if I can truly beat AFO currently. He has so many advantages over me, and combined with his trump cards like Shigaraki, the Namu, and Gigantomachia, there's no telling how this story will go, but with that power from what we saw of it, would allow me to win. I would be able to protect everyone from AFO, and if that future that he showed was real, themselves as well. And if the future that he showed was completely fake. The second responded. Well, then people still wouldn't have to live in fear anymore. Heroes could shine again, inspire hope again, be real heroes again. Toshinori spoke up next. Midoriya, the pressure you face right now is one that we all never had to have gone through, and you're right, there are a great many things that AFO has against you, but you are not alone. You and your friends and the other pro heroes still care and still want to fight with you. You can still win if you come together just like you've done before. His ghost started to get up and walk towards Midoriya. Even if that future was true, you can change it, Midoriya. I know you can. Knight, I knew you could. Before he died, he told me that he saw your future. You were supposed to die in your fight with Chisaki, but you didn't. You survived and were victorious. You motivated me to keep on trying to do the same and defy fate. We decide our own future. It is not something predetermined. So please, Midoriya, I still have the faith that you can beat the odds and defy fate again. As he said those last words, he hugged Midoriya. Midoriya hugged him back and silently cursed his own lack of confidence. If All Might and his friends still believed in him, then he wouldn't let them down. As the hug between master and apprentice ended, the dark empty void became full once more with the similar planet, and the voice came back with a twang of anger to it. So your choice is decided. All of the vestiges looked at each other and unanimously said no deal. It took a few moments for the being to reply and say, I see. How disappointing to hear. However, suddenly all around Midoriya the vestiges started to disappear into the inkai blackness of the void, one by one disappearing from sight and sound, only until it was him and the planet. Before you make your final decision, I have to speak to you about your mentor Toshinori. He's in danger. Ochako Uraraka's trial. Uraraka was helping out her parents with a construction project, lightening metal beams, allowing the work to be done with less heavy equipment, saving money in the process. She was happy to be finally able to give back to them all the support that they managed to give her even through all their tough times. She was waiting outside at the moment for a very special person to arrive, and he did. His signature green and mossy hair of her boyfriend Midoriya came from around a corner. During their conversation, they had received a call for help because there was a crime happening in the neighboring area. Upon arrival, the battle immediately took off. The villain had got the upper hand on Midoriya and was preparing to take his life. Uraraka tried to help save him, but all her attacks were useless. She couldn't stop what was about to happen. The villain drew back its arm and decapitated Midoriya. Uraraka was helpless. She sat and cried, cursing her own futility. The world slowly started to fade away into nothing but a dark abyss. A humanoid figure approached the crying child, its voice seemingly reading directly into her mind. You fear your own weakness, the possibility of trying but never being good enough. The girl opened her eyes and stared at the barely human-looking creature. Taking a moment to step back at its features, it held no face or discernible features. Its skin was all layers of what could only be described as skin, crisscrossing its body with veins like growth sticking out at the joints. The creature continued, your quirk is one that needs help to fully make use of, but what if that help never arrives? Then I can give you power that will make you your own, self-reliant, no need for others. As the creature ended his sentence, the darkness around her faded back into the same sinister situation as before. Something was off this time, however. Her body began to move on its own. Her hands dug into the ground and she lifted upwards, pulling a large column of earth along with it, almost completely flipping the entire space over. The maneuver allowed Midoriya to get out from under the villain just in time to escape the colossal amount of earth headed for them. The villain and Midoriya split up, and to her surprise the ground started to following the villain. Her hands started to move again and released it, causing the rocks to fall down on top of the villain, crushing him under what had to be 1,000 tons of rock. Midoriya was thanking her for the save and about to kiss her before the world faded again back to darkness, and the strange creature came back. That is only a taste of the power you can have if you accept my offer. The girl sat there in contemplation. She could really help out her friends with this power. She could be of more help to Midoriya and his struggles. But at what cost? What would you like in return? She asked. The voice was quick in response. After hearing his motive, Uraraka was in thought. A world on the brink of collapse brought on by quirks. How would she even begin to explain to people of that future? No matter what, people would undoubtedly resist quirks being taken away. They are a fundamental part of our society that would completely change everything. She shook her head. She's looking at this all wrong. Does she really need more power? She began to think about all of her past experiences, and she felt proud of herself. Even with a quirk that was non-conventional, she still managed to help people. She wasn't aiming to be the most top-rated hero. She just wanted to help her family, and now she just wanted to help people and other heroes, to bring joy and hope to people who have none, and to help the heroes who need it whichever way she can. She looked at the creature and said, I refuse. Quirks may have their problems in the future, but with my friends and the other heroes I'm sure we can make it through anything. The creature said nothing and faded away, leaving her back in the world. But when she opened her eyes this time, she puked at the sight. Not only had Midoriya been decapitated, but the rest of her friends laid there dead by the very same villain. It looked at her, laughed, and fled off in a very familiar direction. She chased after the monster but was too slow to catch it. She saw it fly right to where she had anticipated it to go, a certain construction yard. Iida's trial. Speeding along the streets of the city, Iida was in hot pursuit of a villain, using his speed to lead him into a trap set up by his brother's group Team Iida. The trap worked like intended and the villain was captured without fail. He was congratulated by the group. Before realizing the absence of his brother, he questioned where his brother was. They informed him that another call had gone out for a hero nearby, and he jetted off towards the case. Tenya, wanting to go support his brother, dashed off as well towards his last known location. He hoped his brother was okay. It was a miracle that Eri was able to heal him back to the point where he could be a hero again. He was ecstatic when he was told of Mirio's recovery. He finally made it to his brother's last known destination, and from the area could already see the signs of a battle commencing. Broken street signs, and the road was dotted with craters and claw marks. He followed the trail of destructions towards an alleyway, where his brother and the villain were fighting. The momentary distraction of Iida's untimely arrival was all the villain needed to catch his brother off guard. Using its clawed hands, it sliced completely through his brother's arm all the way up to his forearm. As the appendage fell lifelessly to the floor, a guttural screech left Tensei's lips as the pain registered in his mind. He collapsed to his knees as the blood started to spurt out from the wound. Tenya was in shock from what he just witnessed, but that quickly turned to anger at the villain. He charged forward and attempted to kick the villain away from his brother. The villain dodged out of the way, causing Iida to sail past the villain. He turned around ready to strike again, but halted in his tracks when the villain had grabbed his brother and used him as a shield, holding him up by the throat. Tenya was unsure of what to do and cursed his own lack of judgment in the moment. He should have focused on rescuing his brother instead of attacking, and that mistake cost him. The villain began to slice off tensei mufflers on his still attached arm, but before could do any more, Tenya bursted through the alley using his recipe burst turbo, snatching his brother away and fleeing from the scene. He carried his brothers in his hands, half of one arm missing and his quirk basically gone in the other. The entire time he was traveling, he was praying, hoping for his brother to survive. He noticed his team and signaled for them to stop and help administer aid to his brother. He was in critical condition, but he was barely holding on. But no matter if he did survive, his career of being a hero is gone again, and Eri is swamped with people needing her help no matter the time it will take for her to accumulate such energy. And it was all his fault. As he sat in contemplation, the world around him started to turn black as a humanoid figure approached him and said, "You wish to help people, but you're not fast enough to save everyone or prevent them from harm. I can give you speed so that no one can touch you, speed to always be there, and most importantly healing, the power to heal any injury if you accept my offer." He showed Iida the body of his brother in the car rushing towards a hospital, and the beeping of the heartbeat monitor steadily fluctuating as his brother's condition worsens. The being reached inside and touched his brother, his condition instantly stabilizing. Not just that, his arm completely regenerated and his muffler on his other hand being repaired as well. Tenya was astonished. He looked at the being and asked, "What deal are you suggesting?" After being told of what he had to do to receive this power, Iida wanted no part of it. He remembered what his brother said about being a hero and how he wants to live up to his name. Though a hero should be someone that keeps the civil peace of today and maintains order. What he proposes the future, even if true, shouldn't reflect on the people of today and now. "I will not be a part of robbing people of their quirks for the protection of the future." The creature said nothing, but he retracted his hand from Tensei's body as his body began to convulse, and the regenerated tissue began to blacken and disappear. The heartbeat monitor began to fluctuate wildly again, and the black abyss that surrounded Iida began to disappear. But as it did, he heard the creature's voice one more time. "If you hope for your brother to be healed by the girl, I would crush it now. She will not have that power by the time you see her again." As the world came back into view and he watched the vehicle carrying his brother speed away, suddenly spikes were thrown from a nearby building, spiraling it out of control and into a building. Spotting the villain from before on one of the building tops, he began to run towards the car as the villain threw even more spikes into the overturned vehicle. Sui's trial. Sui was setting sail with the Orky Mariner's crew again, enjoying the breeze and the view as the waves went by on the ocean. The ship had been fully cleaned and their training regime was done for the day, so she had a moment to herself to relax and enjoy herself, when suddenly Sirius ran up to her commenting that the captain is requesting them to the bridge. After arriving, the captain Selkie began to debrief his crew on the situation. Apparently a group of weather-controlling villains had started making a fuss near one of the beaches and fled into the water before the heroes could arrive, and the Coast Guard was asking for their support in capturing them. Once finishing his debrief, the captain did his cute pose and dismissed the group to disembark towards the villain's last known location. Once they got to the area, what they saw was immediate evidence of a previous battle. Wrecked boats and ship parts were scattered in the ocean near a rock formation a couple kilometers south of the coast. There was some Coast Guards scattered in the wreckage, and the heroes immediately got to work on rescuing them from the water before they could drown. As Froppy was searching the water for other potential survivors, finding none, she began to rise back up to the surface. She noticed that the water was getting colder and colder. She started to move away from the area into warmer waters near to the ship. Raising her head above the surface, she saw a battle was taking place. 3 individuals had emerged from around the rock formation, launching an attack on the sailors, helping the Coast Guard from the ocean. One of them was able to freeze the surface of the water, trapping many within the near-freezing water. The captain was quick to come to the rescue of his crewmates, but he was blasted back by a beam of electrified water. He struggled to get up with sparks noticeably coming off of his suit. 2 of the villains combined the quirks of water and electricity to attack again. The captain was thankfully able to dodge out of the way. The group had revealed themselves as the Weather Masters, and they wanted revenge specifically on the captain and his crew for capturing and killing their brother. The captain expressed never having done such an action, but was rebuffed by the group with he was killed for failing his mission, and the captain was the reason that he failed. Froppy was momentarily brought out of the moment by Sirius. She spotted Froppy emerging from the water and asked her if she could do anything about the crewmates in the water. They could die from hypothermia from being surrounded by cold water and ice for too long. Froppy said she could, but due to the cold climate she worried that her body might go into hibernation again. She was going to try anyway and waited for Sirius's call, who was communicating with the captain using sounds to communicate. The signal was launched and both Froppy and the captain leapt into action. Froppy started to use her tongue to break the ice around the crew members stuck in the ice, being able to free 2 of them. The captain on the other hand sought to draw the group's attention. He broke off a large piece of ice to use as a shield to get closer to the group. He was making progress until he was suddenly blown off course by a strong gust of wind, forcing him into the ocean. Another villain appeared, seemingly the oldest of the group. The distraction being gone caused the group to notice Froppy. The wind user sent another gust of wind at her that forced her back, and due to the ice-covered ground the wind was extremely cold, causing her body to lock up and go into hibernation. She tried to fight what was happening, but her eyes started to close and her body began to scrunch up. In her ear she heard a voice, "You have a weakness that makes you worthless. You can't expect to survive like that. Do you expect people to rely on such an unreliable hero?" As her eyes fully closed she saw that she could only assume what was speaking to her. "Who are you?" "And I'm not worthless, Ribbit," she said with conviction, although she had some doubt. "Who I am matters not, but what I have to offer is what should intrigue you. I can rid you of your weakness and offer you greater power to save and help others." The creature raised his massive hand and tapped Asui's forehead. She instantly began to feel an eternal heat begin to bubble within her. Her eyes instantly opened, looking at the weather wizards preparing to launch another coordinated attack at her, causing her to leap in the air to dodge it. She stunned herself with how high she flew into the air, the leap causing a shockwave destroying the ice on the surface of the water in the process. The 4 weather users shot at her while she was in the air, but using her tongue she slammed it into the ground next to them and pulled herself down and out of the way of their attacks. She recoiled her tongue and then launched it at the group, being able to spear all 4 of them into the wall, knocking them out. Just as she was about to question what happened, the world blacked once more and the humanoid creature came back. "This is only a glimpse of the power you can have if you join my cause," he explained his intentions for her to gain this power. Asui sat and thought. She never liked being considered worthless, and having power would allow her to save more people, but the thoughts and actions for that cause are inexcusable. She couldn't deprive people of their quirks just for the sake of a potential future. She began. "No, Ribbit. I can't do that because people have a right to live with their quirks no matter how dangerous. A main part of being a hero is having trust in others, and I choose to trust in our future to prevent that event from happening. Ribbit. Besides, you didn't really have much bargaining power, did you? My weakness can be overcome with others like my friends, Ribbit." The being said nothing but left her in darkness, or so she thought. Her eyes began to open, but her body still couldn't move due to the cold. But she saw Sirius in front of her facing down the 2 weather wizard brothers, while the other 2 were occupying the captain. If she could gulp right now she would have. Fumikage Tokoyami's trial. Tokoyami was prowling through the city at night. He and his mentor Hawks were currently investigating a criminal underground smuggling ring that had recently been discovered by an anonymous tip from a pedestrian who traded the information for a less harsh sentence. The Safety Commission's board had tasked Hawks with confirming the information and, if possible, capturing its leader for interrogation. Tokoyami and Hawks stood perched on opposite rooftops overlooking a street corner that held a shady-looking alleyway that led out to around the building towards the other street. The duo noticed many suspicious individuals entering the alley but not exiting out the other side. The view was blocked on both sides of the alley, forcing them to reposition on top to peek down within the alley, but leaving them exposed to be seen by the oncoming members and tip them off. Tokoyami suggested using dark shadow to blend in with the shadows of the alley so they can get an eyes on approach of where these people are being transported. Hawks agreed and the plan was set into motion to great success. The dark shadow had reported back that the individuals are being taken underground somewhere. Upon hearing this news, Hawks planted one of his feathers on one of the individuals going down the alley. Using his feather he was able to figure out the opening to the hideout. Calling the police to cage off the area, Hawks instructed Tokoyami to burst down the door, and from there the battle commenced. The surprise attack was going smoothly for the side of the heroes, eventually breaking out into the streets of the city. Though there were 20 members in total, but only a handful of them had any combat training in their quirks. Hawks, using his feathers, attempted to capture the criminals, but inadvertently helped them, as one user was able to steal half the speed of his feathers with just a touch and hand it out to other individuals. After stealing the speed of 10 of his feathers, the user has handed it out to what appeared to be the boss. Another user within the criminals group began to touch the ground and drain the energy sources of the street lamps, causing them to black out, which was the cue for the leader to take off at incredible speed. Hawks called to Tokoyami that he was going to go after him while he stayed there with the police and other heroes. Tokoyami nodded in confirmation, and Hawks took off after the escaping boss, momentarily distracted by dodging an attack from one criminal. Another with a strengthening quirk and speed boost had suddenly appeared behind him, striking Tokoyami in the back of the neck, knocking him out. As his concusses faded, he felt dark shadows form, expand, and grow. You fear your own power, so you push others away, but what if you could control it? Tokoyami opened his eyes and stared at the humanoid creature in front of him. It began again. You were a loner and cold to the people you met, not just because of your appearance, but because you feared accidentally killing them if within a dark place. But with that curse came a blessing, power strong enough to defeat foes you normally couldn't have. The being showed his loss of control during the school survival training, him attacking Shoji as well as him easily beating Moonfish. But there is a weakness that can prove detrimental when you need that power most. He showed a more recent event where he was against the villain Slice in front of UA. Her hair was as deadly as ever, but she could suddenly generate lighting between them once placed in the ground, creating a light source that surrounded him in dark shadow, forcing him into a weakened state, unable to help his friends Momo and Iida, who were getting pinned behind a shield she created. The sense of powerlessness came flowing back into him from the sight, speculating if he died and this creature was some being to taunt him. I could alleviate both of these curses and make you extremely powerful. A second chance. The memory started to change. Even while being surrounded by lighting rods, Dark Shadow was able to increase in size rapidly and swiping slices away casually. This power is yours. You lived long enough with the curses of it. Now if you join me, you will be rid of them. All I ask in return is for your obedience in destroying quirks forever. Tokoyami didn't need to think before giving his answer after hearing the cost of such power. No, I have lived with the Dark Shadow all my life. I know how to keep him under control. Besides destroying all quirks, you say. That's foolish given what I am. There is no cure for mutant quirk users, and even if there was, there inevitably be a battle between people who would want to keep their quirks, and if I oppressed them with this power you granted me, I would only be the monster I've been suppressing my whole life. The mysterious being simply faded away as Tokoyami began to regain consciousness, only to hear the stuttered words of his mentor Hawks. To Tokoyami, curious about his mentor's hesitation, looked at himself. Some of the street lamps were activated again, and all around him were badly broken and bent bodies. The police, the criminals, and two pro heroes Rocklock and Slugger, who were near the crouching Tokoyami, all of which were no longer breathing. Shoto Todoroki's trial. Blue flames licked past Todoroki's right side as he dodged another attack from his brother. The large flames scrolled past only to be taunted by his brother about where he was aiming. The flame he avoided was barreling straight towards his classmates. He immediately pressed his right hand on the ground, creating a large barrier of ice in front of his classmates that immediately collided with the blue flames, creating a shroud of steam. Todoroki emerged from the shroud and immediately took off in a direction away from the rest of his classmates, hoping that his brother would follow him and not endanger his classmates from their battle. Thankfully, his brother seemed to take the bait, but no doubt in his mind suggested that Toya knew what he was doing but decided to play along anyway. He didn't get far, however, only to around the school building before he noticed the heat of another fire blast hot on his trails. Turning around and unleashing fire blast of his own, the two flames clashed, both users fighting and pushing for dominance within the clash. Todoroki felt himself begin to be overwhelmed and had to dodge out of the way to avoid being burned, only being partially hit by on his left side. Oh man, are you lame? I would have thought all those lessons with Pops when you were younger would have paid off. But you suck with your flames. Your heart's not in it. Like this. Toya shot forth an even larger burst of flames that Todoroki countered with his ice. The flames shattered the ice almost completely, forcing Todoroki back onto a knee. Toya, you don't have to do this. I understand the pain that you're going through. I too have suffered from the hands of that man. But if you came back, we could have gotten through it together with me, you, Fayumi, and Natsuo. That man doesn't have to be the focal point of your life. It's yours to live, but the way you are now is nothing but slave to your anger. A slave to the man you hate so much. You can take back your life right now, just Sura. Todoroki was interrupted by Toya laughing. He looked almost insane. Listen to yourself. Do you honestly believe that I could have come back and be together with everyone? let alone you. He let out another fit of laughter. Huh. I guess they never told you what happened between you and I. Huh. You were separated from us when you were younger and want to know the real reason why. Truth is, even when you were just a baby, I've always wanted to kill you. I almost did, in fact, when I was younger. All good times, he said with a face like remembering a fond memory. As soon as my father found out about my body composition, he said as he pointed towards the dead skin on his arms, he shunned me, dissuaded me from the path that he set up for me, and in the ultimate form of disrespect made you his true son, his true heir. The rest of us were failures in his eyes, and he treated us as such. You had all of his attention that I wanted, that I had. You are his one true son, and I will show him how much this failure is better than you right here and now. Toya then unleashed a flash fire fist, jet burn attack, and Todoroki countered with a flash freeze, heat wave attack. Both blasts clashed and a colossal explosion spreading out, covering over the entire UA building. The force of the attacks colliding sent Todoroki and Dabai flying. Todoroki hit the back of his head against the UA building and his world began to go dark. I can help you, you're in need of my power. Todoroki woke up to a dark, seemingly dark, empty void. Well, mainly empty. The center held a large creature in the fetal position that spoke with a soft voice that betrayed its size. Who are you and where am I? Todoroki immediately spoke. The soft voice returned, what I am doesn't matter, but what I have to offer you, power. You do not have what it takes to subdue your brother. He is stronger than you, but you fear for your life. I can offer you the power to do such. How can I trust you? What do you have to gain for giving me such power? The reply was almost immediate. What do you have to lose? Your brother will kill you if you don't take it. The only thing I want in return is your loyalty to my cause of extinguishing quirks. Think of your life. Do you believe that you are the only one to experience such pain from quark marriages? Multiple portals appeared that showed people what Todoroki presumed to be from all over the world. Kids and their parents' ficode of happiness to the public, only countered by the dark secrets behind closed doors. Some showed the kids rebelling against their parents, even an instance of one child killing both of them and running away. Other instances of forced procreation to finally get the child one of the parents wanted. So many awful things are happening. Quirks have discriminated and harmed so many, and they will continue to worsen until no one can stop them. All the portal joined into one, showing a different picture of the world in flames and chaos, giant behemoths towering and destroying those below them, people on the ground fighting each other for basic necessities. This is where your world filled with quirks leads, but join me and you can stop it from happening starting now. Your brother, all for one, and even one for all, will pale in comparison to what I can give you. Todoroki was taken back by almost everything he saw. He didn't know if he could believe this creature's words, but if they were true, he could prevent multiple catastrophe and end the one they're currently in. He thought of his brother's words and how his family life had crumbled apart from its very conception. If he was born earlier, or if his brothers had the desired traits that father wanted, his family wouldn't exist as today. His father and the system was the root cause of those problems, however, not quirks themselves, and he understands his faults and is trying to atone. Todoroki began to speak. No, there is no way for you to confirm that future is truly real, and even if it were, there are things we can do to change it. As for my brother, I have already agreed that not only me but our family will handle him together. I have no need of your power. As he said those words, his vision started to return to him. He felt a warm breeze wash over him, as looked up and was shocked to see his sister hovering over him as an ice wall maintained by his brother and mother was shielding him from Toya's next attack. His surprise turned to shock as a condensed blue flame speared through the ice wall and punctured through Natsuo's stomach. Momo Yaoyorozu's trial. Whoa. Jiro suddenly jerked back, detaching her earlobes from the ground. She warned everyone that something massive was incoming. The pro heroes around the classmates started to run up and reinforce the line broken by the monster coming their way. A short time later, the students began to hear a transmission from Lady Midnight. She requested that Momo take charge and sedate the beast. The transmission came to an immediate end a short time later, while confusion rattled the students of 1A and 1B. Pondering on the many things that she should advise her fellow students to do, she steeled herself on taking action. They set up a plan where Juzo would soften a large part of the ground, causing the beast to fall, and they would simultaneously try and sedate the beast and attack the League of Villains. Trapping the beast in the mud was a success, but tragedy struck the team everywhere else. The team sent to attack the League had underestimated the League's countermeasures. Once they finished throwing Kaminari's pointers, he himself was suddenly hit by a pile of debris, sending him careening to the ground. Ojiro, Shoji, Aoyama, and Komori were all caught in a huge fire blast, sending them falling through the air screaming and on fire. Shizaki plants around the behemoth's neck were sliced off by Spinner, allowing it to stand once more, and Jiro was missing an earlobe from a thrown knife by Toga. The students quickly set out to help their wounded classmates and cool them off. The secondary explosions combined with Mount Lady was able to knock the creature off its feet once more, but everyone was preoccupied with helping the wounded to take advantage. She attempted to charge the beast herself, not allowing Mount Lady's struggles to be in vain, but the beast blew a mighty breath that flung her back and impaled her on a broken tree stump. The beast with newfound power completely decimated Mount Lady and the surrounding heroes, Lucky being spared only to see the monster run off and cause more havoc. She watched in utter hopelessness as her plan had not only failed but got a lot of her friends injured. The stress, frustration, and pain she was going through was too much as she began to black out. You fear the weight of being a leader, you lack confidence in yourself and your quirk. Momo was floating in a sea of stars. Nothing appeared to be visible but that of a single planet that seemed to resonate with her. I can give you power that would build your confidence and replace what was lost to you. The planet's surface began to show a view of Lady Midnight's final moments, how she desperately fought the villains approaching her, but there were too many. She was beaten and bruised. She never gave up her spirit even until the end. The power I give would make death meaningless to you. You could create life. The planet then showed her failed plan again, but this time it was different. She watched as a person looking exactly like her seemingly created two heroes, All Might and Endeavor. These two clones also had their abilities. The behemoth was stopped in its tracks by All Might and the League was suppressed by the flames of Endeavor. She couldn't believe her eyes at the spectacle. Could she really have a power like that? The planet darkened once more and spoke. You can have this power if you join my cause, the destruction of all quirks. They will become a plague upon your society, leading you all to extinction within generations. All of this information was so much to take in. She thought about everything she saw and had a mysterious sense of déjà vu that she couldn't place. She thought of that scene of Midnight and her final words, I trust your judgment. That battle with that monster, Gigantomachia, she remembers. She did manage to sedate him, and because of that, like Beast Genos said, the heroes managed to win. This creature was playing with her, trying to play with her memories to tempt her. She would not let it get its way. I refuse. I know the truth and I accept what happened on that day, and I still believe I made the right choice. The creature spoke in a more surprised tone and said, oh, so you figured out the illusions. You are smarter than the rest, I'll give you that much. What do you mean the rest? What have you done to my friends? She said in reply. Nothing that should concern you now. However, let's see how far past your choice you really are. The creature said. The stars began to fade away and she was suddenly within a forest. She heard a familiar voice that had haunted her close by. Once she turned towards it, she saw Midnight's last stand. So close, like it was real. As she saw her getting beaten, she tried intervening, but all of her attacks just faded through the attackers like she wasn't even there. All she could do was watch as her mentor was beaten to death, and something even more vile. Jiro had his trial. Jiro was going from one bad situation to another. One scenario would have her be on stage and be completely embarrassed in front of everyone in the school when she couldn't speak or sing the whole song, and dance recital was ruined and Class 1B mock and humiliated them for the entire rest of the festival. Her classmates would give her consolidating words, but she knew deep down that she messed up, and everyone thought so. It was her idea in the first place to sing, but when she got in front of the crowd she choked. The only saving grace was that the festival was closed early due to a lame villain crashing the party and causing mayhem. Midoriya was also nowhere to be seen during the events, and he was supposed to get the supplies for the event, not that it mattered now. As the scene played its course, another familiar scene played out, with this humanoid reappearing in front of her asking if she was ready to accept his deal. Her answer as before was no. She couldn't force billions of people to sacrifice their quirks just to avoid one of dozens potential futures. She didn't believe that the future was set in stone, so even if what the being showed was the truth, there's no way that it couldn't have been avoided if we did things differently. Just like before when she said no, a different scenario played before her. This time she was back in the rear guard with her other classmates, besides one who was towards the front. She was worried about the idiot but was ultimately cheering him on from behind. The battle commenced as brought the wall down. The next things the heroes knew was a giant wall of ice came spearing forth, and Kaminari, being in the epicenter of the attack, was undoubtedly hit directly. Jiro screamed and ran forward, hoping that the worst was avoided, that maybe the pro heroes could have reacted in time, or he would have dodged out of the way on his, but nothing. No words left her mouth as she could already see the impaled body at the tip of the mountain of ice, his unique yellow hair making his body stick out like a sore thumb. He was dead, just hanging lifeless. No words could describe the thoughts running through her head at the sight. She just turned back as the pro heroes surged forward, crying, but before she reached her classmates in the rear guard again, the world went dark and that same being came back. Your feelings won't be enough to save him, you need power. Just think of how powerless you are without your gadgets. What can you do by yourself? The being said, I don't need your stupid power as long as it comes with that dumb plan of yours. I don't even know why you insist on putting that person in trouble in the first place. He doesn't mean anything to me more than any of my other classmates. Jiro replied, you may lie to yourself, but you can't lie to me. While you may not have any traditional alignment or weakness, your feeling will make up for that. The being said, whatever, just leave me alone already, my answer is not changing. Jiro said finally. The black abyss started to wink away and everything appeared to be normal again. She was back at the school dorms and there was a knock on her door. It was Kaminari. He had asked her if she wanted to go out. After a moment of being flustered by the implication, he clarified that some of the class were going out to eat and wanted to see if she would join them. After calming down, she agreed and followed him out. But noticing that no one was around, she asked where everyone was. He replied with a dead serious look and said that he was a traitor. He was the one that leaked the summer camp destination to the League. He was the one that told them of the teacher's plans attack so long ago. He asked her if she wanted to leave with him. She was speechless, wondering if this was another elaborate joke of his, but his eyes didn't show even a trace of that goofy, carefree grin or attitude. Suddenly behind her, the rest of the class burst through the door and said similar things he just told her before she could react. However, he held her hostage, lighting in one hand, forming that of a kunai as he used her as a shield. Kota's trial. Kota was in a forest playing with all of the friendly forest creatures. He was having a lovely time. When he was finally too tired to run anymore, he sat down and started to have a picnic with his new friends. All was well and peaceful until what felt like an earthquake shook the ground beneath them. Kota immediately requested for his bird friends to go see if anything within the area could have caused the shake. The birds returned with news of a mysterious person found in a crater nearby. Kota asked them to go get other heroes as he went to investigate. As Kota got to the crater's edge, he found that the person had begun to get up from his position. As he got up, Kota asked the guy if he was okay and was in need of any aid. But all he got in response was a sudden attack from the stranger. He shot out of his hands a blast of magma. Kota dogged it out of the way and tried to reason with the person, but he seemingly didn't hear him or simply didn't care. The magma instantly started to spread through the trees and grass, lighting the surrounding area with fire and smoke. Kota instantly began to run. He needed to leave the forest quickly before this guy did any more damage to it. The strange man didn't let him leave, though he was able to corner Kota by sliding on his magma and cutting off his pathways at every turn. Kota didn't know what to do. He tried to ask the animals for help, but their fear of the fire would lead them to decline his request. He struggled on what he could do as the stranger drew closer. Seeing his life flashing before his eyes, he let out a large screech of his voice, this time not requesting aid but demanding their aid. No sooner than he did so, birds swooped in and started harassing the stranger, followed by bears and wolves hopping through the flames to attack. It went as well as he expected as Kota ran away. All he could hear was the death screams of his animals dying from being burnt alive. He closed his eyes and covered his ears to block it out, but it continued until he bumped into something. He opened his eye to see a giant humanoid feature. You are letting nature and the creatures around you die because of how weak you are. Your compassion outweighed your own self-worth. The creature said. What are you? Kota asked. I go by many names, but for now you can think of me as the embodiment of Mother Nature, and I want you to be a champion to protect the forests and animals of this world. You flee because you alone are weak, but I can make you strong. For this strength, all you need to do is to protect this world from the evil that is its quirks and vanquish it until it is no more. The figure said. What? The quirks have done so many good things for the earth and the people. They can't all be bad, could they? Kota exclaimed. You are young and naive, but just like now, quirks will only lead to more suffering and pain for the earth. It needs to be stopped now before it is too late. The being replied. Kota sat there and thought of what he should do. He didn't want to hurt anyone that didn't deserve it, but at the same time he didn't want the animals or the forest around him to be hurt anymore, and with more power he could really be a her. Suddenly he remembered what Midoriya told them at the hospital, how heroes didn't need to fight villains, how he could be a hero that relied on rescue and recovery. He didn't need power to help anyone. His friends and other heroes will always be there to help him. No, I don't want your power for that cause. I don't need it. Kota said. Then you will burn, just like the earth will. The figure said and disappeared. Kota soon turned around as the stranger was still approaching him as he melted the head of a bear in one of his hands. Toru Hagakura's trial. Toru was experiencing one nightmare after the next. The USJ attack, the summer camp assault, Nabu Island, and the Liberation War. Each scene punctuated by a disembodied voice claiming her to be worthless. Various flashes of her classmates being injured during those incidents, followed by the voice calling her a coward, useless, worthless, and not fit to be a hero. Toru suddenly found herself all the way back during the UA entrance exam. She was shocked to realize that this year the victory bots were not going to have an off switch, as there is no such thing on a person in real life. The news made her anxiety rise even more, bordering hyperventilating. How could she destroy those bots with a measly quirk such as invisibility? She thought of how unfair this all seemed. Why during her test did they have to change the rules? Before she could spiral anymore down the rabbit hole of pity, the test commenced. All the students dashed off, and despite her misgivings she still went along anyways. The exam was going as well as she expected with the rules. There was no way for her to earn any points from the victory bots. She tried until her knuckles were bleeding from hitting the bot's metal carapace. This was a bad move, however, as the blood allowed the bot to pick up on her presence and charged at her. Feeling completely helpless, she tried to run away but tripped up on destroyed robot pieces scattered around and resigned herself to her fate. But she was saved by a boy in a karate gi and a tail, smashing the robot before it could get to her. He wrapped her hands in bandages with parts of his gi. She was about to thank the boy before the ground started to shake and the building around them started to crumble around the two. Both students began running away, but the debris was catching up to them. The boy managed to save her again and managed to bat her out of the way, only to be trapped himself. She tried to help him, but the rubble was too heavy for her to move. He warned her to leave and go find help, which she did. As she emerged back onto the main street, she noticed all of the remaining students running away from the what appeared to be a giant match as she tried to flag someone down to help her, but with her being invisible and the sounds of the resulting chaos, a loud crack was heard above it all as the robot was knocked off its feet, and the exam came to an end. She ran back to see if the boy trapped under the rubble was okay and saw that he was being carried away by smaller machines unconscious. She felt useless at that moment and wasn't surprised when the letter came in the mail saying she failed the test. Once hearing the news, all she could do was lock herself in her room and cry. You were born with a weak quirk and you lack skill. You're not worthy of being a hero. Who could you possibly protect but yourself? A voice in her head said, "That's not true. I can be a hero. I can save people." She replied, "Yet your actions say otherwise. Every time your friends are in danger, what did you do? Nothing but hide and give encouraging words. You're a coward. But I can save you. I can make you a true hero. Power is what you lack and I can provide. With my power and your quirk you could be invincible, a true asset of justice." She saw images of her being able to shoot out light from her hands, ride light waves, and stop light in its tracks. In return for this power, all I need is for you to get rid of quirks entirely. They are a plague upon your society, and it will inevitably destroy you all. The benign finished its monologue. Toru sat and thought about the offer and her life so far with Class 1A. She couldn't deny what the creature said on some points. She really wasn't helping her class when it really mattered, but it wasn't because she was a coward, was it? She just lacked ability and didn't want to be in the way. She remembered her talk with Midoriya and said she didn't need to be on the front lines fighting. She could go undercover and prevent people from being in danger in the first place, just like Hawks did against the Liberation Armory. She still can be a hero. No, I don't need your power. I'm perfect just the way I am and I can help people in my own way. She began to open her eyes again as the voice didn't reply, but as she opened them she was somewhere completely different, near an improvised ring area. And inside it was two individuals, Ojiro and a minotaur-like person. She watched as the fight commenced and Ojiro was gored upon its horns as she ran to try and help him. Mishiro Ojiro's trial. Ojiro was reliving through his past memories. He remembered his past in middle school when he announced that he wanted to audition UA, and being bullied for it because of his ordinary quirk. He was constantly teased about how simple and ordinary his quirk was, and he was determined to prove them all wrong, and he did. He made it into UA. But slowly but surely his quirk started to fail him in comparison to his classmates. It all started at the very beginning when he was completely overwhelmed by someone as gifted as Todoroki, but he wrote it off as Todoroki was extremely powerful even compared to his other classmates. During the sports festival, he was brainwashed and succeeded only with the help of Shinso. Also after work study, Midoriya, someone who was worst in the class, had surpassed him at what he was now aware was only 5% of his power. He also didn't help his friends when they went to rescue Bakugo, and the ultimate insult was his failure in the joint training battles with Class 1B. Everyone the entire time was mocking him of how ordinary he was in comparison to them, and he doubted his abilities even further when he almost lost to Senkaibara in close quarters combat and had to be saved by Iida, and even worse when he was captured by Pony Tsunotori and because of his lackluster performance and quirk forcing them to draw in the end. He never felt so worthless. The massive liberation war showed him just how futile his quirk was. He couldn't imagine being there with Midoriya, Bakugo, or Todoroki given how hurt they were. The thought just made him sick to his stomach. His world faded away, and upon him was a great planet that spoke in his head. You have the heart of a warrior, but you are limited by your body. You seek to prove yourself, but even you know the futility of your power. But I can offer you greater power, even stronger than one for all. No one will call you ordinary again, the planet said. What are you after? Why would you help me? What do you hope to gain? Ojiro replied. I only seek to destroy the thing that causes so much pain in your society. Those that are born with subpar quirks are humiliated. Those born without quirks entirely are outcasts. And they always are at the center of extreme harm. Imagine a world without them. A world where everyone is equal and hard work can triumph over talent. The being said. Ojiro sat and thought upon this creature's proposition. He could gain power at the cost of everyone else losing theirs. The creature raised so interesting points as well. The problems quirks caused for the society, but there are also the good things such as advancements in medical fields, almost infinite amount of energy, and advancements in technology. He couldn't deprive everyone of their abilities just because he feels inadequate, and it would solidify people's doubt of him all along. And he still had his pride as a martial artist. He would progress his own way with his own power. No, I don't need any handouts, especially for a price such as that. I will be a hero by my own power, just like I set out to do. I will show everyone that you can rise above people's expectations of you. Ojiro exclaimed. As he finished his statement, the world came back into view. He was in a dark alley at night. A sudden movement caught his attention from above, but before he could react to it, a searing pain from behind ripped through his body. He turned to see the hero killer Stain approaching him, holding a segment of his tail in his hands. Aoyama's trial. Aoyama was experiencing the worst time of his life. Everywhere he went, people just ignored him or seemed like they didn't even notice he was there. No matter how much he tried to sparkle and shine, no matter how in their face he got, it would be no reaction. Like he was Toru quirk, but even more extreme. It was so lonely. He was all alone, just like he was before in his childhood. His parents would often be away working, not having time to play with him or be there for his important moments, such as graduating middle school or even getting into UA. His childhood friends had moved away and was never to be heard from again. People would often ignore him at the parties he was invited to, and he lacked the charisma to attract any girls. His life was a sad, lonely life that no one would look at. That he hoped to change once going into UA, but it was happening again. No one would recognize him. Did they really care in the first place? How could they betray him like this? Was all the time together an elaborate joke? Maybe pity, and these were their true colors. He returned home one day to a note being left at his doorstep. His parents were killed in a crazy earthquake while in the States. The combinations of all the events that transpired that day got to him. He crumpled the paper in his hands as he fell to the floor in tears. He didn't know what to do. Everyone seemed to have abandoned him. He thought about ending it all, and maybe then people would care and truly see him, but he didn't have the stomach to do it. So he did the next best thing: crime. People would have to acknowledge his existence then. He got into a group of criminals doing petty crimes and steadily upping the ante, till he came face to face with his old friends who had become heroes. He was finally noticed by everyone, and with that his life was complete. So he had jumped and ended it all with a smile on his face. You hide your insecurities behind all the sparkling and over-exaggeration. You don't want to be seen for who you really are, an irregular, uninspired person with a bland personality. Aoyama opened his eyes to a giant humanoid creature. The sheer size of it made him shake with fear. You are just an extra in someone else's story, but I can make you a star that overshadows everyone else. Something that is not only the main character, but the author itself. All you have to do is join me, the creature explained. What would you have me do? Aoyama asked. The creature's words rang true in a way. While he was training to become a hero, he knew that he wasn't the most popular, and especially now he felt more isolated from everyone with how hard they were trying for Midoriya's sake. My quest is to exterminate the plague that are quirk from your world. You will be the last person with a quirk, making you the shining beacon that no one else could match. The being replied, I must refuse. There is no way I could do something like that to everyone. My stardom would only be held up by a lie and technicality. True stars rise through the ranks with conviction and grit, like All Might, like Midoriya. The world around him started to fade in again. He was on stage receiving an award. It seemed like the same award ceremony for the top 10 heroes, but the crowd wasn't cheering, they were laughing. He turned the trophy he received around to see the words "World's Most Annoying Hero" on the plaque. Mizo Shoji's trial. Pain, pain, pain. Nothing but pain was felt all over his body. So many different ways he was inflicted with pain. Whether it be having his dupli arms cut off and forcibly regrown by Spinner, being burned to death by Dabai, or slowly crumbled into nothingness by Shigaraki. Each new scene only brought about more pain and suffering due to this mysterious creature. Just like before, he's brought back to the void where he can remember everything clearly as new, contrary to the visions where everything feels like it is really true. Do you still reject my offer? You will break eventually. Why go through so much pain in the process? The humanoid being said, of course, I won't sacrifice everybody else's freedoms just at the whims of some wannabe be god. Torture me all you like, but I'm sure my friends or heroes will save me soon. They just have to hold out. The student yelled back ferociously. The creature laughed and said, you fool, no one can save you from this torment besides me. Only I have the strength to set you free. And that shall only happen once you accept my offer. Since you want to see your friends so badly, how about you go visit them? The creature replied. The dark world started to fade away into a dark, murky vision. He looked down at his body and was shocked to see it was not his natural self. His body was mutated, much larger in a dark black color with scars going all the way down body. His body moved on its own accord and faster than he was ever possibly capable of before. His arm suddenly stretched out and he followed its direction to see that it was attacking something. He was shocked to realize that it was Tsu. It had caught her by the throat and thrashed her around on the ground. He saw blood start to spill out from her body as it was flung from his grasp. He was suddenly struck in the back by Ojiro, but the attack barely phased his body as another hand sprouted out from his back, catching the boy's tail and breaking it with its grip. His screams was haunting to his ear, but his body didn't stop there. Spawning more arms from his back, he grabbed Ojiro's body and began crushing it in his grasp. Being suddenly blinded by a light in his front, another hand spawned, but this one with wicked claws exploded out, spearing Toru in the stomach, and as the light faded, he threw her corpse into a nearby rock. He was horrified by what he was doing. One by one he was killing his classmates, his friends, Kota, Sato, Sero, Momo, until suddenly he was blown back off from an explosion. His body quickly got up ready to continue fighting as Midoriya, Bakugo, and Todoroki approached him furious. Rikido Sato's trial. Sato was going through hellish pain and torture. Some scenes would involve his arms and legs being broken, his head being crushed, him being force-fed numerous sweets until his quirk overloaded and his brain was irreparably damaged. Every scene was followed by those things that called itself God, asking the same question, offering the same deal. It was funny in a way. Every time the visions would begin, he would think it was real, like that was his reality, but every time he drew back into the void, all his real memories would come back. Whatever this thing was, its power transcends most of the quirks he has ever seen besides All Mights or All for Ones. The creature really didn't have an enticing offer for him other than some vague visions of the future that he couldn't possibly trust no matter the circumstance, especially given how vivid the creature can make his illusions and how he can make them feel real. After telling the creature to screw off once again, he went into another vision. Sato was placed in the middle of heated arguments between his classmates. Midoriya had had enough of Bakugo bullying and pushing him around. Some of the girls were extremely mad at Mineta for his pervertish antics. Todoroki seemed like he just wanted the nose to end. Tokoyami was annoyed by Aoyama's sparkles getting on him, and so on and so forth. Eventually the arguments turned into full-blown fighting, completely destroying the class they were in and separating the class into three factions with Midoriya, Bakugo, and Todoroki as leaders. No matter what he attempted to do to appease one side and have them forget about their feud and come together again didn't work. The fighting was worst one day when Sero and Mineta had caught Uraraka by herself one day. They had strung her upside down and threw balls at her from below. Before anything worse could happen, Midoriya had come in enraged at what the two boys were doing. He launched into action, but in his anger he forgot to hold back his strength and killed Mineta. The shock of it all allowed for Sero to escape and report what had happened to Bakugo. This enraged the teen and got revenge by killing Iida in an ambush. Sato was horrified as his classmates were just killing each other in horrific ways and blaming himself on not being able to keep the peace. Hand to Sero's trial. Sero was unamused by this creature's games. It first tried to tempt him into his deal by bringing up how unremarkable his quirk was, people making fun of him, the villains he faced conveniently always being the perfect counter, and so on and so forth, but he already have come to terms with how his quirk was, and being so a laid-back guy, other people's thoughts about him didn't really affect him. How about sending me somewhere nicer this time? Man, all this shaming is getting tiring. Sero said to the being. I may have underestimated you. You seem to be much more put together than what you present yourself as. The creature replied. Hey, what's that supposed to mean? I'm probably the most level-headed in the class. Well, maybe besides Shoji, he's pretty chill as well. Can't imagine him going through this. I mean, what would you even try to tempt him with? The guy's clean slate like me. Sero continued. The creature took a moment to reply, as what the boy said actually held some truth to them. Some of his classmates had completely no faults or trauma to exploit to tempt them to join his cause. "Yo, are you still alive over there? Did I hit the nail in the coffin?" Sero said with a cheeky smile. The being rarely felt emotions, but this insignificant worm is truly annoying with his gloating and remarks. "You may not have any emotions that I can manipulate, but let us see how much you can run your mouth with after going through pain for eternity. If you want to make it stop, just say I accept your offer and it will all end." The being replied. With the mention of the word pains and eternity caught Sero's attention and completely changed his mood, but before he could say anything in reply, the abyss was gone again. By the time the world came back into vision, he felt a stinging pain on his hands and his legs, only to realize that he had been pinned to a wall with swords. He then realized in front of him were a bunch of villains. He noticed the League of Villains immediately, followed by some bird mask weirdos that seemed familiar to him somehow. But his train of thought was halted by a blade being thrown at him and narrowly missing his face. He shuddered from the close call, only to feel a horrible stinging pain as a blade went through his stomach. The villains they were, taking turns throwing knives at him. After some time he just couldn't feel anything anymore. He was bleeding out and about to be saved by the graces of death, but it was not to be. He was suddenly completely better and undamaged. One of the bird mask guys had seemingly healed him, but that was short-lived as another knife was thrown, landing directly in his eye. His screams drowned out the rest of the pain as more people got ready to throw their own blades. Mineta's trial. Mineta was having such a wonderful time. He was in the promised land of the world, a beach full of hot chicks and babes as far as the eye could see, and what made everything better was that they all wanted him. Everyone praised and looked up to him for his courage and valor in being the one to defeat Shigaraki and one for all. He began to retell his story to the girls around him that were fanning him and feeding him grapes. He explained a massive battle sequence where Class 1A was fighting the villains. Midoriya, with the help of Uraraka, were able to keep Shigaraki suspended in midair, where his decay quirk couldn't be used to wipe them out. With him out of the way, all that was left were the League of Villains. He was able to trap Toga with his balls, making her extremely vulnerable and easily captured. Same goes for that lizard guy. He was able to take him on himself. That guy was just a stain fan with no skill. All he had to do to taunt him, and he foolish fell into his trap of pop-off balls. I allowed my friends to take care of Dabai. I couldn't take all of the credit, now could I? The group started laughing and feeding the savior of Japan grapes. The experience was so surreal to the young boy that he forgot to chew and began to choke on one of the grapes. As his world began to darken, he suddenly woke up in a dark void, only to see a giant humanoid being. What are you? Where are the girls? What did you do with them?" the boy said as his emotions fluctuated between scared, confusion, and anger. "You want to be popular with girls, but you are the most unimpressive and cowardly of your class. I can make you a champion, someone every girl would be infatuated over, if you join me," the being said. Mineta was still frightened of the creature but perked up at what it said. "And what would you have me do?" he replied. The creature explained his plan to the young child but also added, "Think about your current situation. Do you really think you as you are now can help save Midoriya? He holds great power, but with the hero's losses and the number of powerful enemies, do you think you could actually be useful? Sacrifice quirks for the safety of today. The changes take place over generations away. There is no need to sacrifice them now, and with my power you could be a true hero, someone like All Might and Midoriya that you admire so much." The creature's words were all so true. He was useless as he is now. He couldn't support Midoriya even if he tried. He was useless, but now he could have a true purpose and really make a difference. People may hate him later on for what he has to do, but he will gladly take the hate for saving everyone now. You have Denki Kaminari's trial. Kaminari was waiting in the center of the assault formation of the attack on the Liberation. His thoughts were all jumbled as he got his courage to continue on. Some complimentary words from his fellow hero relieved him, but only just. Somehow the heroes immediately knew of the villain's opening counter-attacker would be an electric user, but their information was right and his attack was immense. But he still tried to absorb it. At first things were going well, but the villain was suddenly jabbed in the neck by a syringe, and his attack in another wave even bigger than the first. All that electricity he was absorbing was tempting to overload his systems, and he had a decision to make. Whether to bite the bully and keep absorbing, and hopefully this new boost wears out before he does, and most likely rely on the heroes around him to protect him in his inebriated state, or disengage and hope that someone else could pick up the slack and be less of a liability this close to the front. The decision was almost unanimous as he stopped absorbing the electric shock, and as soon as he did, the lighting hit the heroes almost immediately, stunning a lot of them and compromising their front line as the villains rushed through the holes presented. The initiation was on the villain's side due to the exchange, and the fight was going poorly for the heroes, but after some time they were able to get it back into a 40-60th split. Now Kaminari was in the thick of the fighting and his fear jumped exponentially. He couldn't use his quirk regularly and there was so many people flying which way that it made it difficult to properly use his pointers. So the most rational thing he could think to do was run away. He was actually supposed to be launched back into the rear guard, but the girl had seemed to be hit by the juiced up lighting, forcing him to huff it on foot. He was suddenly hit in the back by a fireball and he quickly rolled around on his back trying to extinguish it. He was suddenly surrounded by individuals he couldn't recognize. The hero line was pushed back further than he anticipated, but it offered him an opportunity to use his quirk full throttle, which he did. But they didn't fall so easily, so he kept it on and finally they fell, but he could already feel his mind slipping as the last individual fell. He was powerless to stop the next villain who was slashing at him with a bladed arm. He closed his eyes before the blow could connect. As he opened his eyes, he was floating in space that only contained one planet. It seemingly spoke to him. You lack confidence and courage with a quirk that leaves you defenseless. Join me and you would have no need to fear anything, and you will have a near bottomless tank to absorb and discharge not just lighting but any natural element, be it fire, ice, wind, water, and even light. Planet seemingly said pointedly. The idea of a talking planet was crazy enough, but saying it could help him and solve his problems seemed even crazier to the boy. Did he die? This seemed like one of his animes he watched where the protagonist would die and be reincarnated into another world. Wait, are you God? Did I really die? The boy started to go into shock from the news that he might be dead, but sudden calmness steadied his mind and body. I go by many names and God is one of them. However, you are not dead. I am calling upon you as one of my champions. I'll offer you incredible power that you can use to save your society, defeat AFO and save your friends. All I ask in return for your service is to destroy the quirks that populate your world. God had said, whoa, that's a lot to take in, and get rid of quirks. Why would you want to get rid of something that you created? Kaminari asked. I designed quirks as an experiment to test humanity. That experiment has an expiration date. Your people call it the quirk doomsday theory. Quirks will continue to get more and more violent over time and kill everything on the planet. I simply wish to avoid that future, and you will be my champion to do it. God explained. Wow, really? I'm really that special? But how will I be able to get rid of quirks even with great power? I won't just kill everyone with a quirk. That's messed up. Kaminari said. You will not have to kill anyone. The villains you face already have the means to erase quirks with a vaccine. You must simply convince them to take it. Kaminari sat in thought. Everything seemed so impossible to believe. But then again, he lived in a world where quirks existed, so to others his world could seem the same. Quirks are so important to society, he couldn't imagine how the world would be without them, but the alternative is chaos. At least one choice still leaves society intact. Alright, it looked like Mina Ishido's trial. Mina was currency in an unwinnable situation. The class had been separated by the villains in front of the school. The villain from Paradise Island had come back to attack them again. She had fear of the last time she fought this women's slice. She had been struck in the side before but was luckily saved by Tokoyami. But it seemed like this time it was different. Her hair acted as lighting rods ready that trapped Tokoyami in a barrier, dark shadow being too weak to be able to break out. Now she was alone and fighting her, and she was just too much. Her fear was starting to get the best of her. Her feet work and movement began to stumble as she ran around the school building to evade her foe. Her other classmates were too busy fighting the other villains to come and help her, so she was by herself. And that made her anxiety spike even more. She was eventually struck in the leg, and the lighting within the pin-like needle hair sent shocks all throughout her system, causing her to trip up and spasm while on the ground. As the villain approached her, she mocked her struggle and questioned where all of her agility went since the last time they fought. Mina wanted to cry and beg for mercy, but she couldn't due to how her body was still reacting. The villain, having enough of the gloating, raised her hair up and shot forth more spikes, stabbing her in numerous places, before she finally blacked out from the pain. You display fake bravado when you are around others, but fear when you're alone. You will not always have an audience to be behind you or someone with you. How can be a hero like that? Mina opened her eyes only to see a void of nothingness. She then saw a giant humanoid being that and instantly began to back up from the figure and shot acid at the figure, but once seeing the being was completely unharmed, she simply watched as the creature walked towards her and stopped some feet away. You have the potential to be able to be a true hero, but you require others to be around for you to accomplish it. I could give you courage to be better all by yourself. There would be no need to repress your fear for others, as you will have no fear. The creature explained. Mina said nothing. She didn't really care what this thing said. It looked disgusting and untrustworthy. She wouldn't let its words get to her. Even now you're surrounded by fear. I sense it in you. You do not need to fear me. Just take my hand and you will never know fear again. The creature continued. Mina stopped listening a while ago and closed her eyes. Whatever these things were, she wasn't going to go along with anything it said or accept anything it wanted to give her. As she opened her eyes, she was back in field again, back at the school. The pins and needles were removed from her body and Slice was nowhere in sight. She began to walk back around the school, back to her classmates, only to be horrified by what she saw. All of her classmates were dead or dying on the floor, blood pooling by their bodies from holes or bruises. Some even burned to a crisp from flames. She also saw Midoriya tied up, being carried away. His eyes met hers and it looked as if he was begging for help, but she couldn't move. She didn't want to move. How could she? Everyone was gone. What could she do by herself? She watched as they carried him away, and as they left through the portal, all she could do was cry. Ojiro Kirishima's trial. He is too late. He's just too late. Kirishima was going through many visions, all of them having a similar theme of him not being able to be there in time to protect those that need it. First it was Fat Gum. He recovered too late to shield him after his quirk was overwhelmed by Rappa. He was pummeled and beaten down before he could redistribute the energy he collected. Then it was Mina. He couldn't get there in time. A tree had fallen down in their way, to which he had to bust through, but it slowed him down just enough to before he could knock her out of the way. She was squashed by that giant monster. Another was when during his fight with an AFO assassin, he couldn't make it in time to shield Mineta, and the explosion had put his classmate in the ICU with little chance of recovery. Lastly was during the battle in front of the school. Like before, Rappa was striking him repeatedly with his fist, but thanks to his training he was stronger than before and was able to tank them with his unbreakable. His friends on the other hand weren't so lucky. Ojiro and Shoji both attempted to help his friend from the villain, but they were both overwhelmed from the flurry of blows that Rappa launched, blowing them backwards into the walls of the school. He tried attacking, but it was worthless under the complete onslaught his foe could launch, and his blows were often deflected or collide with Rappa's covered gauntlets. His unbreakable was wearing out and he hadn't scored any damage to get this lug to slow down. Eventually the wall fractured and one blow sent him soaring back, hitting his head against the wall of the class, knocking him unconscious. You're a wall to which attacks break, but what if that wall is not fast enough to form? Kirishima woke up now, being completely in a dark abyss, rotating around a planet that talked to him. You have the durability to protect yourself very well, but you lack in everything else, and a hero is meant to protect others. I could give you power to protect those around you even without you being there. Just join my cause and you shall be able to protect anyone. Kirishima was taken back by what the planet had said. Were those visions of gruesome fates its doing? And I'm guessing that you're going to ask for something in return, aren't you? Kirishima asked. Indeed, all I ask is to destroy the quirks of your world. They are a disease inflicted upon your earth that will. No real hero would punish people for how the quirks of the future might behave, and no real man would try and take the easy road filled with handouts. They take what they are given and will try to make it work, and that's what I'm going to do. Kirishima interrupted. The abyss immediately vanished, and what came in its place was another vision, this time involving multiple pedestrians in trouble. One was about to get hit by a car, another was about to be hit by a building sign, and another was being robbed in a nearby alley. He had to decide which person he would save, but the other would pay the price in return. Katsuki Bakugo's trial. Camera flashes, clapping, whooping, and praise all came from the crowd in the stands as the new #1 hero marched onto the stage. His explosive outfit being a statement of not only his personality, but his explosive quirk as well. Bakugo had started to walk onto the stage as the announcer listed off his accomplishments and glory. The greatest of generations, the hero that never loses, the new All Might, and finally the ender of One for All. Dynamite. He was alone on the stage and finally got to the microphone and was about to give his statements to the audience when suddenly the lights all went out and turned on with a dark amber mood. Bakugo noticed that the crowd had suddenly started to crumble to ashes, and a mysterious wind started to collect the dust, and it gathered it into the shape of a humanoid figure. The figure was giant. Its head held no distinguishable features, but nonetheless it began to speak. You pine for the top of the hero world, but you know that it's impossible. You are destined to fall behind Midoriya, at best second best to those you felt superior to. Bakugo launched to attack the creature, launching an explosion towards its chest as he was replying to its taunt. I am going to be #1. Don't mention that damn nerd, he's nothing compared to me. As the smoke cleared, the creature was gone, but he reappeared on the stage where Bakugo just was, and he continued to taunt him. You know that to be untrue? Just be honest with yourself. Bakugo launched himself towards the villain again, creating an ever greater explosion on the stage, creating a large cloud of dust. As the dust cleared across from him on the stage was Midoriya. The being spoke again but didn't reveal itself. I shall show you. Begin. Unable to find the villain, Bakugo refocused his attention to Midoriya, and as he did so he felt something was wrong, but before he could act on that feeling, his vision shocked him. He seemed further away than he was before, but what really shocked him was that he could see his own body minus his head, which was currently flying away. The creature voice rang out, "Death number 1." Suddenly he was back on his body in the same position as before. He heard Midoriya voice speak out, "You can't keep up." Another exchange. This time Midoriya casually walked through a number of Bakugo's attacks and punched right through his stomach just to reset again. You're too weak. He tried to get high above him, but he was too fast again, this time using Black Whip to puncture his leg and drag him down into the ground, resetting again to position. This exchange happened many more times. Bakugo died a dozen more times, each time taunting for how weak and pathetic he is. The creature began speaking again. You may be thinking that this only because of One for All. He has so many quirks and abilities that have been strengthened over generations. Of course you can't beat him as you are now. It's an unfair comparison, and in a way you are correct. There is another, however, that you could not hope to match, and you may disagree, but it is the truth of how weak you are. As the voice died down, the Midoriya imposter began transforming. He became taller and his hair had the distinct red and white color that could only represent one person. Yes, that's right, Todoroki is much stronger than you as well. If you can't hope to beat him, how could you hope to beat those above him? Begin. Todoroki as always started off with his signature ice attack. It was a grand attack that dwarfed even the one he used against Sero at the festival. Bakugo tried to stop it using his AP autocannon, but it barely scratched the ice. The attack landed completely, stabbing on the edges as they arrived. He reset again, launching himself at Todoroki using his condensed explosion to get into the boy's face, but the boy was able to react and he was frozen in ice and his body shattered as the scene reset. Bakugo luck didn't fare better in his fights with Todoroki. He was frozen, impaled, burned, and sometimes even boiled alive. This reset the creature back. You're weak. You couldn't hope to surpass All for One or One for All. You can't even damage them. A memory flashed into his mind of Shigaraki ignoring him and telling him he's not interested in him anymore, and Midoriya completely overwhelming his howitzer impact. I can offer you strength, enough strength to achieve your dreams of being number 1. Bakugo began walking towards the creature. All you need to do is take my hand and you will be the strongest hero, unbeatable. Your friend was chosen by your idol and received almost unrivaled strength. It is only fair that you are chosen as well. He kept walking towards the creature, and just as he was about to take the creature's hand, he let off an explosion. The creature was unfazed by the attack and didn't move. Bakugo balled his hand and put a thumb up, gesturing to himself, and spoke. You know, you almost had me there, really, you did. Power to even greater than One for All. Only a fool would give that up, but you made one crucial mistake. You know what that was? Comparing me to that nerd. He needed a handout from the strongest hero just to catch up to me, and even only recently to actually surpass me. I realized as you spoke, the error in my own thoughts. When the hell did I want to be like him? I was always ahead of him, but he was always ahead of me as well. It was because he was ahead that I pushed myself to be stronger, and like hell if I'm going to take the easy road. And as for that half bastard, just like Midoriya, I'm going to prove to the world that I don't need to be chosen or have multiple quirks to be the best. So you can take your offer and shove it. The creature was silent, and Bakugo swore he could feel a faint vibration of anger going on, but he couldn't really tell. A massive wind surge marked the creature's departure, and as he opened his eyes again he could see both Midoriya and Todoroki across from him, and he smiled and readied his stance as he said the words, "Begin." Midoriya City. In the middle of one, the streets leading in and out of the city, a rupture of space-time expanded, cratering the ground beneath, followed quickly by another orb of darkness that expanded just above the ground, and from it a man appeared. A tall, muscular man, with spiky, graying hair and a beard, wearing bulky armor with large shoulder pads and a large cape. Upon seeing what had come out of the larger orb, he was shocked and spoke to himself. This is especially strange. In front of him were a circle of 20 dark cubes in such close proximity. That would be strange in of itself, but the fact that seemingly above each cube held a teen in a containment field made the situation even weirder. He checked his surroundings and noticed that in the distance a robotic drone was coming over to investigate. No doubt that Metal had designed safety monitors on the road so that in the event of damage, his bots would be there to monitor the disturbance and repair the road. He needed to act fast. Bafoy was no doubt the inquisitive type and questioned the association on what's happening, and given his power and influence he could easily strong-arm them into sharing the information, which would make his job a lot harder. He quickly gathered the boxes as fast as possible, which in turn moved the teens floating above them as well, and quickly put his hands together, the circles on his gloves forming an infinity symbol as his power flowed outward, encircling himself and the 20 cubes, teens, and together they disappeared. The events happened so quickly that by the time that the drone approached the damaged street, it had not visibly seen what could have caused the damage to the street. Multiple drones searched the surrounding area, but upon finding nothing only noted the disturbance and went to repair the damage to the road. A large bubble expanded over the roof of the Hero Association headquarters. The armored man carefully placed the cubes back down on top of the roof, each cube denting and sinking into the metal slightly, but luckily stopping before completely falling through. As he finished placing each individual cube down, he began to step away from the cube, setting a distance of around 30 feet before suddenly creating a portal with one of his hands and reaching into it, grabbing someone and hosting him through and closing it back. The man that he brought through the portal was a fat man in a black business suit with gray hair and a round nose. He was terribly frightened, to say the least, but calmed down once he saw who it was. "Blast, God, don't frighten me like that. You have a phone for a reason, you know," the fat man said. "Oh, sorry Sitch about that, and have you guys done some redecorating?" "A city kinda. Different from when I last saw it," the man known as Blast said nonchalantly. A terrible alien assault had stricken the city and destroyed everything in their first attack. Luckily, we were having an S-class meeting at the point in time of the attack, so we were able to counter-attack immediately. Tatsumaki was instrumental in destroying the alien ship, while the rest held off the ship's invasion force. Metal Knight took up the reconstruction effort, being able to build all this in just 10 days. We decided that to more efficiently send out heroes to monster reports to make a city into a fortress world with roads leading to all major cities. The man replied. The mention of Tatsumaki brought a smile to Blast's face. She really did come into her own and embraced her power, but other matters were more important at the moment. "The reason I brought you up here was because of that," he said, gesturing to the 20 cubes and teens that they contained. "I haven't run into anything like this before, and I don't know how long they've been in there. Given that they are teens, they are probably impressionable as well and will most likely fall for that, being persuasions. Think I should release them anyways?" Blast asked. Sitch sat and thought him, if these people can cause as much damage as others infected by that being's power, then it would be a big problem if they all went wild at once. Blast may be fine, but himself, well, he didn't want to find out. On another note, if these kids' parents file missing kids reports, they would have to continually assign heroes to dead-end jobs similar to the Manage investigation story, and with the predicted rise in monster activity recently, that would be no good. But perhaps they could use this to their advantage if Blast's assumption is correct. Maybe we could use these children as heroes, and that being power could be used for good. Blast, in your time dealing with people who have accepted the being's offer, has anyone ever shown signs of being friendly? Sitch asked. No. Blast's response was immediate, his voice hardening, almost threatening. Drat, well, let's just try and take them out one at a time for safety. There is no guarantee that they accepted this being's deal, unless they had something to gain from it. It would also be inconvenient to just leave them in there, as then you can't stash them in your dimension, and having to carry these cubes around would be very unwise, especially if a monster got a hold of them. Let me see, how about we try with that boy first, he said, gesturing to a boy with mossy green hair. Alright, but be prepared for anything, was Blast's reply, and he reached his hand out and a portal attempted to open up on the bubble containing the boy. It strained, trying to keep close, but eventually gave wave to Blast's power and opened, dropping the boy on the ground. Midoriya began to stir, struggling to open his own eyes as they stared up into the sky. Wait, the sky. He moved his arms and legs to get a range of motion. He heard someone speak from some distance away, making him immediately sit up and look at who was speaking. A tall, bulky man that looked like a hero with the word Blast on his chest, and a businessman with gray hair. The two were unrecognizable to him, and quick glance around of his surroundings shocked him to not only be in a strange whole new place, but to see his classmates trapped in bubbles. He turned back to the strangers, this time more worried than ever of an impending attack, but the tall man, who he assumed was named Blast given his close, greeted him very casually, simply saying yo as he lifted his arm in a wave. Yo, are you alright over there, kid? The man in bulky armor said again, waving at Midoriya. Did you agree to that creature's deal or what? Midoriya was still a bit stunned and slightly confused on who the man was and what he meant by that creature's deal. But it all came flooding back to him after a moment. That planet within his subconscious, could he be referring to that? No, I didn't agree to it, Midoriya replied skeptically. Who are you, and where are we? Midoriya asked. Introductions can wait until all of you are properly out so we won't have to repeat ourselves. The businessman answered. You say you didn't take the deal, huh? But I sense a growing power from deep within you. Care to explain? Blast immediately asked. Midoriya was caught off guard by the person's question. Did this guy have a quirk that allowed him to sense other quirks? He wagered on what to answer, or more precisely how he should answer, given that he doesn't seem to know me. He may not be in cahoots with AFO, but he has never heard of any hero named Blast in Japan. Perhaps he's one of the foreign heroes that Endeavor talked about, but that doesn't explain his location, or why he and his friends were trapped. Midoriya ultimately decided to err on the side of caution and said, what you're probably sensing is my quirk, the 7 Wonders. It grants me all sorts of abilities. The tall man seemed unconvinced and skeptical of his words and said, Ray-eyed quirk you say? And tell me, how did this quirk of yours manifest? It was Midoriya time to be confused. How could they not have heard of quirks before or know how they function? Even if they were foreigners, surely they would be unable to not have seen or read about them before. They made up 80% of the population. Well, it's something that manifests in about everyone once they hit the age or -5. A weird power or mutation that is the culmination of either their parents' quirks or something new altogether. Midoriya replied, are you trying to play games? Because this isn't a laughing matter, kid. The tall man's voice hardened some. No, I'm honestly telling the truth. If you could release my friends, they would tell you the same thing. Midoriya replied immediately. The 2 older gentlemen whispered among themselves, deciding on what to do. The boy wasn't making sense, but he hadn't followed any of the patterns others did when being touched by that creature's power either, so they allotted to go along for now. Just as the 2 talks concluded, the boy spoke again. You don't have to let all of them go, but if I could proposition a choice, I would request that the small boy with purple hair and the boy with the yellow hair be let out immediately if possible. Oh, and why would that be? The businessman had asked. Well, sir, going off your body language, you visibly relaxed when I answer no to the other one's question. So I guess that taking that creature's deal is seen as a bad thing. While I trust my classmates like me to resist its temptation, unlike me, those 2 are a special case. Midoriya answered. The other gentleman laughed at that. Well, he sure is an observant kid, I'll give him that. Well, okay, well, go with your plan. Blast lifted his arms and 2 portals opened up on the barriers, dropping their content on the ground. After some time, both boys started to stir and looked at each other and celebrated that they were finally free and out of that place. They noticed Midoriya and rushed to his side, asking about if he was the one who freed them, but the boy simply pointed in the direction of the other 2 across the way. Well, now that you are reacquainted, did either of you accept that creature's deal? The tall man asked. Both boys said no, and that they were pulled out before they were able to, causing another burst of laughter to emerge from the tall man. Well, it seems you have real knowledge of your friends. You guys should be thankful he saved your skins just now. Do you 2 know what quirks are? Asked the man in a business suit. Well, duh. Everyone has them. Kaminari explained while generating lighting from one hand to another, and the other boy removing a chunk of what he assumed was hair from the top of his scalp, and it instantly regenerated on top of his head, shocking the elderly man. It looks like you weren't lying about that either, the taller man said. The 2 gentlemen talk amongst themselves, while Midoriya and his group did the same. The 2 expressed worry about where they were and if the 2 across from them were villains or something. Midoriya didn't know for sure, but didn't want to jump to conclusions. Besides, so far, that guy seems like the only one capable of releasing the rest of their friends in the first place. Reasoning if they could do it as well, he doubted they would have allowed them to be this close to each other when they got out. On the other side of the rooftop, the 2 conversated on what should be the appropriate steps currently. If what these people are saying is true, they either mutated by being in proximity from being around the cubes for so long before coming into direct contact with them and being trapped, or there was literally the possibility of a civilization of superhumans out there somewhere in the world. Both seemed incredibly dubious, to say the least. Ultimately, the 2 decided on a plan of action and turned once more to face the teens. Blast lifted both his arms and portals opened up on the rest of the trapped teens, and they all fell on the ground. Certain individuals immediately catching Blast's attention and creating another portal separating them from the rest of the class. Midoriya ran over to Bakugo as he didn't stir or move like the rest of his classmates, but he was still breathing, and after some time begrudgingly began to open his eyes. Upon seeing this, Midoriya was happy, but that soon turned to shock as Bakugo's eyes sent a death glare his way and he was too close to dodge the attack he was preparing, but a portal suddenly appeared as Bakugo lifted his hands, swallowing them, and a large explosion set off in the air 100 meters above their position. A portal immediately appeared below Bakugo, swallowing him whole, and Midoriya was left shocked at what happened to him, only to see him appear some distance away on the roof along with Tokoyami, Kota, Shoji, Mina, and Toru, followed by the man's voice again. Well, it seems you were wrong on this one, kid. Your friends over there have obviously taken that creature's deal. They have already begun to monsterfy as a result, even attacking you upon waking up. The tall man began to walk towards them, cracking his knuckles menacingly. Midoriya was suddenly hit by a massive wave of pain from his danger sense. It was incredible he had not experienced anything this great since his fight with Shigaraki, but compared to that, this guy was a lot worse, like comparing a toothpick to an oak tree. Where did this bloodlust come from? The guy was so carefree a moment ago, how could he hide all of this? He remembered what he said about Kaminari and Mineta. Was he planning to kill those over there because he thinks that they are gifted? Given that he didn't know what quirks were, then mutant types must have been also new to them as well. He had to stop him. Wait, they are naturally like that, it's their quirks as well. He struggled to talk as he pushed through the pain. Don't worry, kid. You don't need to make excuses for them. I'll make it painless. It's better this way, trust me. The tall man replied, continuing to walk to the still recovering group of teens. As he heard those words, Midoriya was already stretching his leg to gather Fujin to make it in front of the man. He launched forth, charging 100% OFA into his fist, his emotions and danger sense getting the better of him. Pseudo 1,000,000% Detroit Smash. Blast saw out of the corner of his eye the boy moving towards him, reeling back a fist. He was slower than him as expected, but much faster than he thought he would be. Seeing the desperation and the fear in his eyes, he decided to hear the boy out. He had stopped and waited for the boy to reach him and block the strike. The resulting explosion of air pressure didn't launch anyone off the roof, but was felt even as it was kilometers away in the sky, making the others cover their ears and crouch down from the noise and wind pressure. As Midoriya opened his eyes, he was shocked to see that the tall man had not only blocked the attack, but did so with just one finger. The shock of it all completely froze Midoriya as his powers left his body. He got down on his knees and begged the stranger, "Please, believe me, they didn't accept that gift. Quirks take many forms and they can change their body as a result." Hearing Midoriya please, Kaminari, Mineta, and other students that recovered joined in and reinforced what he was saying was true. The man simply raised his hand and placed it on Midoriya's head. He began trying to enter the boy's mind and read his memories to truly see if they were telling the truth, but suddenly he found himself hovering above an empty void. Nothing in sight other than what looked like a piece of building with what appeared to be several chairs arrayed around a fire. He steadily floated towards the chairs where he began to hear voices. As he touched down on the piece of rubble, black energy immediately sprang up, trying to ensnare him. He didn't care to dodge and let the black energy wrap around him, still puzzled by the scenario. A voice rang out from one of the chairs. Got him. I thought it would be tougher than that given what we just saw, but maybe it was just a coincidence of his quirk. Suddenly the black whip started to tug on his body. He floated along with the whip and was pulled in front of a group of 7 individuals sitting in those chairs. "How did you get in here?" the only lady of the group asked, somewhat threateningly. "I don't even know what here is, and who are you people? Why are you guys living in this kid's mind?" A similar voice as the one in the beginning came from a bulky man that was the largest of the group. "We are the ones asking questions here, wise guy, and you better start answering them." He made a show of tightening his restraints in a show of power, but Blast decided to stop playing this game and simply broke out of the black whip himself. "What the?" The members of the group began to get up, preparing for a fight, but were halted by the man in the center. He had a white shirt with his hair covering his eyes and spoke, "Easy now. We do not want to make Needles enemies if we could avoid it, especially one so strong as well." Another voice spoke up from another person that didn't stand. He had a strange scar across one of his eyes with yellow hair. "Yeah, you guys don't have danger sense. This man is trouble. Everything in my body just screams for me to get away. Just like All for One, but even worse." The man with white hair continued, "Well, stranger, you have our attention. What would you like to know?" The others in the group reluctantly began to sit back down, and Blast relaxed his muscles, which he noticed made the one with yellow hair relax as well. "Well, this is really strange. What I was trying to do was read this young boy's memories. Now I'm suddenly here. I guess that you guys are some sort of defense mechanism for his mind, and that too is related to this so-called quirk. And the 7 people here probably match the abilities the boy has. Would I be correct in that assessment?" Blast asked. "You would be indeed correct. We exist inside the boy's subconsciousness due to our bond with the quirk. May I ask, why do you need access to the boy's memories?" Another person noted, this one in a collared jacket with black hair. I am simply curious if he is telling the truth or not. His memories don't lie. It's not every day where people have supernatural abilities or body mutations that weren't monsters in our civilization." The group were a bit confused about the man's statement, but while speaking telepathically decided that it would be better for Midoriya, and the rest of his friends if they would comply with this man's wishes even if they could beat him out of here. It would only make him more suspect of them and may cause him to lash out. They all agreed and let the man go where he needed. Several images flashed through Blast's mind of Midoriya's life, his training and obsession with a guy called All Might, his entree exam, his hero course exam, and his fight with a villain he called Shigaraki. All of this happened within a few seconds as he removed his hand from Midoriya's head and said, "All right, I believe you." Midoriya looked up and was surprised by his turn of heart, and all that bloodlust simply evaporated away, lifting what seemed like a cruise ship off of his shoulders, allowing him to stand up again and watch as the man walked back over to his associate. "Oh, and you didn't have to lie to me about the name of your power. It's one for all, isn't it? Not 7 wonders. Also tell those people when you see them that it was a cute attempt to hide it from me. It only made me want to find out more." Midoriya was caught off guard by the man's words, but continued on to the rest of his class and figured out their next steps, though something told him that it was not up to them to decide. Blast walked back over to Sitch and filled him in on the current situation and what he had glimpsed from Midoriya's memories. "We may have a bigger situation here than I thought. These kids may not be from around here," he said. "Well, obviously, if there is a group of powered individuals, then surely the Hero Association would have found it, or at the very least some of the individuals would apply to be a hero." Sitch replied, "No, you're not understanding. They may not be from around here as in this plant hell, maybe this very universe. Who can tell when it comes to that creature? The visions I saw in the boys' memories, the damage inflicted to the city and the scope of their society, it would be impossible to conceal from the rest of the world without going unnoticed." Blast said definitely. On the other side of the rooftop, the rest of the teens were also conversating on what happened and where they were. Most of the class looked to Midoriya as he was the first to wake up and have at least some idea of what's going on. "I don't have many ideas either on what's going on. I woke up just like the rest of you, due to that man freeing me, and after some convincing we managed to convince him to free the rest of you," Midoriya said, pointing to the man in the white bulky armor. "Speaking of which, why did you attack him all of a sudden, Midoriya? If what you said is true, he saved us from whatever trapped us in with whatever was in those cubes," Sero asked. Midoriya began to fidget and play with his hands before answering. "That guy, he's bad news. I don't know if he is a hero or not, but one thing for sure is that he's dangerous. With danger sense, I can feel his bloodlust and killing intent. I truly believed he was going to kill you guys, that he separated from the group based on your mutant quirks. Whatever that thing was we were exposed to, it must be bad news to have to result in such drastic measures for those that accept its deal." Midoriya fidgeted some more. A look of relief flushed over most of his classmates, relieved in their choice to not accept that creature's offer. Besides the two individuals shaking from Midoriya's tail, both Kaminari and Mineta thanked Midoriya for essentially saving their lives and preventing them from making a horrible choice. Let that poser try to kill me. I would have destroyed him easy." No, Bakugo was caught off by Midoriya. "None of us can beat that man, so it would be unwise for any of us to get on his bad side or suspect us to be under influence of that creature. That attack that I hit him with was at 100% of my power, and he managed to block with just one finger." This drew shocked gasps from all of his classmates, and it was Todoroki that spoke this time. "Are you sure that his quirk just isn't just a counter to brute force, like some nullification or absorption quirk?" Surprisingly, it was Kaminari to speak up this time. "Nah man, if he had or knew about quirks, he wouldn't have needed me and Mineta to showcase ours to believe Midoriya into freeing you all. And he wouldn't have tried to attack the others as well for having mutant-type quirks either," Mineta added. "They're right, it wouldn't make sense. That means he is just naturally that strong or something else. Either way, he may even be stronger than All Might in his prime." This revelation created an air of silencing from the class as a whole. It was Uraraka who was always the optimist, trying to make the best of the situation. "Well, maybe that's not such a bad thing. If this guy really that strong, we could try and convince him to help us back home. He could be a real asset to us and be the main person in leading the charge against AFO. That way you don't have to leave again." Her voice got quieter and quieter, where the last part was barely audible. As Midoriya was about to comment again, a sudden cough got his and the group's attention. It seems as though the two have come up with what they were going to do to them. "Hello everyone. Now that you all are awake, I think it is only fair that we introduce ourselves. My name is Sitch, and the man next to me is the S-Class Rank 1 Hero Blast." He paused for gasps of shock or excited murmurs from the teens, but when none came he continued onwards, noting the strange reaction or lack thereof. "You are currently on top of the Hero Association headquarters in the newly rebuilt City A. May I ask where you all are from?" The man named Sitch asked. A boy with glasses stepped up in front of his classmates. "Good evening, sir. I am Iida, and this is Class 1A from UA High, a hero school based in Japan." Japan. Sich sat in thought and asked the first question that came in his head. And what city would that be in? This drew a confused glance from the boy. Sir, Japan isn't a city, it's a country based on the continent of Asia, sir. The city specifically we came from was Musutafu. This an even more confused look from Sich as the boy spoke. He looked to Blast and they both nodded their heads in agreement. Excuse me, but we really need to get back there as soon as possible. There's currently a crisis going on that I need to be a part of to stop. And if you could help us with it, that would be very much appreciated. The boy with mossy green hair spoke up. Blast rubbed the back of his head as he replied to the boy. Well, that could be a problem to achieve if my hunch about you all are correct. It would be better to talk about this inside the building. But before we go, I need all of you to make a promise right now. None of you are to speak about those black cubes or any of your experience with the creature in the void to anyone that is not myself or Sich here. It is a classified and highly top secret project that can't get into the wrong hands. The cubes that were currently denting the floor were suddenly swallowed up by a portal under them, sending them to a place that only Blast knows where. The whole class nodded their heads in understanding and Blast continued. In any case, you all and most likely ourselves as well will have a lot of catching up to do. We will try to get you guys home as quickly as possible. If it's possible, Blast said to himself, but for now let's all get off this roof and head inside. 2 portals opened up above the students, himself, and Sich, and swallowing them whole. They immediately found themselves on ground level directly in front of the building they were just standing on and were ushered inside by the 2 adults behind them. They were quickly separated into a common area that was completely ordinary for them. It had a couch, TV, computer, love seats, and more. There they sat and waited for further instructions as the other 2 left, giving them some alone time to process just what was happening to them. Kaminari and Mineta fought over control of the computer while the others lazed around on the sofa and chairs. Jiro attempted to use her phone to get into contact with her parents on anyone but realized that it was impossible. They had no connection to any service network. Others also attempted to try themselves only to run into the same problem. No one had a service connection. They instructed Kaminari to see if he could reach anyone through social media using the computer provided, only to see that none of the known sites seemed to even exist. They turned on the TV to see if any of the news channels were covering the attack in Musutafu. But not only did they not even recognize any of the news channels, but there was no mention of it anywhere. Midoriya reasoned that having 20 teens go missing would be something the school would definitely try to cover up, especially in this time of panic and confusion, as it would no doubt put an even heavier burden on the heroes. Sich came into the room and asked for one of the students to follow him and for some questioning. The class was reluctant to follow the man's request, as splitting up in an unknown environment surrounded by unknown people would be foolish. Sich assured them that this wasn't a trap and that separating them is just a safety precaution, and would allow them to see if everyone's stories match up without being influenced by everyone else. Midoriya decided to go first to put his class at ease, and he would have the best chance to break out if anything went wrong. They also knew about OneForAll, and given how they haven't attacked him yet, leads him to believe that they're not with AFO. He was brought into a room lined with a bookshelf and a computer situated on a desk. It was parallel to the common room they were just in. He was gestured to sit opposite of the desk with the computer. Your name is? Sich asked. My name is Izuku Midoriya. And do you have any form of identification on your person to confirm that? Sich followed. Midoriya sat for a moment before coming to a thought and digging through his pockets to fish out his provisional hero license and gave it to the man, which drew a surprised look from the man. He took a moment to type down something on the computer and returned the card to Midoriya. So you're a hero in training. From this place called Japan, am I correct? Midoriya nodded in confirmation. And in this Japan there are more people with these powers you called quirks, correct? Midoriya nodded again and added, not just in Japan either, sir, all over the globe. All continents on the planet have quirks. In fa, continents is in plural. Midoriya slowly nodded his head yes. Midoriya was really confused now. Sure, maybe these people could have been isolationists that shunned quirks of any kind and therefore don't know much about them, but everyone should know the absolute basic fact of geography, that there are multiple continents on the planet. He began to start typing on the computer again. And these quirks manifest from birth. Potentially, it depends on the quirk type. Mutant-type quirks can be seen at birth itself and become more profound the older a person gets, but usually others appear around 4-5 years old. Again, more typing in the computer was heard before the next question was asked. You mentioned that there are different types of quirks. Can you elaborate further on that subject? How many are there and what differentiates them? There are all sorts of quirks out there, but the three most popular ones are emitters, as the name implies emits or changes things around them. Transformation allows the person to change something about their body, and mutants, which permanently changes a person's body in some relation to their power. Sitch typed as the boy spoke, listing all the interesting things he said. Fascinating. On to a different subject. The card you gave me said you were a hero in training. Are teens your age normally trained to become heroes? Not necessarily, no. Kids can opt into the hero course similar to other professions. The hero course trains students to be heroes. And why would there be a need for heroes if nearly everyone has a quirk to defend themselves? While it is considered illegal to use your quirk without a form of hero license. Oh, I see. Well, that is all the question I can think of asking for the moment, but before we dismiss, I would like to ask you one more thing. Would you be willing to give us a blood sample? We don't know how long your stay here will be, and it would be wise if we had some data to work with in case you need treatment done. As he talked, the desk started to shift and change until it released a drone-type object with a stinger that hovered near Midoriya. After Midoriya nodded his head in confirmation, the drone pricked his skin and began drawing blood from his body. I thank you for your cooperation. Once you return to the common room, you may send in the next person. Midoriya understood and began to walk towards the door, but turned before leaving. We really need to get back to Japan as quick as possible. If you have been informed, we are currently in a state of emergency. The villains have mostly overrun the place, and without me there's a good chance they won't be able to stop whatever is coming next. Sitch gave a tight smile and replied, "We'll try to get you back as quickly as we can, but it may take some time as we figure everything out." With that said, Midoriya walked out the door back to the common room. The rest of his class was in, to a barrage of questions of what he was asked and more. Midoriya managed to comfort his class and convince them the questions were mostly ordinary and nothing strange really happened. The only thing was the request of a blood sample from him, which he told them may be asked of them as well. He asked who wanted to go next, and it was surprisingly Jiro who went next, her reasoning being that she wanted the Wi-Fi password to this place. Midoriya pointed in the direction towards the door and watched her move out, and after having confirmed her going to the right place, he turned back to his class huddle over on the couch. Much of the conversation was on the strange environment and their new surroundings, and the people that inhabited it. As the discussion continued on, more students would trade as their questioning came to a close. It was when Iida returned with a book in his hands that the conversation took on a different tone. "What's that in your hands, Iida?" Momo asked. "It's one of the books I saw on the shelf in the room. I asked Sitch if I could borrow it. It's about the heroes here." The dialogue and structure is interesting, however. The book mentions several times of being only one continent, and that heroes are segregated into rankings similar to ours but different in that there are classes starting from S, A, B, and C. There are only around 400 heroes, which is staggeringly low for even the worst country, let alone a continent. And what's even weirder is that the books doesn't describe any of the heroes' quirks, but instead lists their weapons and special skills. But what's worrying is the use of killing in the book. It lists the amount of exterminations a hero has and any notable monsters that the hero has killed. The room's mood had become dark and sour. Heroes that kill people, and they're being praised and accommodated for it no less. What sort of topsy-turvy world had they been teleported to? But through one of their minds, that news was the final nail in the coffin that connected all the dots. Kaminari started laughing, drawing strange looks from the rest of his classmates. "That thing really didn't. I was joking, but it really did do what I think it did," Kaminari murmured to himself. Mina, who was the closest to him, blurted out, "What? Did you figure something out? Out of all the people here that we're not getting?" He looked at her, then to the rest of the class who all had their attention on him. He looked everyone in their eyes before saying, "Did Ice Guy us?" This drew confused looks from almost everyone in the class. He was suddenly poked in the ear by Jiro. "You dweeb, this is serious. There is no time for your games." After recovering from the pain, he pressed on. "I'm serious. Todoroki, back me up here. Doesn't this seem like the same plot of an Ice Guy?" Before he could comment, it was Momo and Tenya who almost simultaneously asked, "What is an Ice Guy?" Jiro was the one who answered. "It's one of the losers, manga, anime genre. It's a complete work of fiction." Todoroki spoke up after rebuffing her statement. "I wouldn't be so sure to dismiss him so casually. He does bring up a valid point. Within that genre of fantasy, the main character or characters are usually teleported to another world where things are different from the one they are used to in one way or another while staying similar in other ways." "Do you seriously believe this, idiot?" Jiro protested. "Yeah, that would be very hard to believe to be even possible, Ribbit." Sue added, "Yeah, but I bet quirks that are normal to us would have been seen as impossible to people generations ago as well." Sero pointed out. Jiro had nothing else to counter. It would also explain why none of the traditional social media sites even existed or were completely different to how they're supposed to be, and why the group's emails didn't exist at all. Todoroki spoke again. If we are seriously giving this theory some thought, it would also explain the creature we saw as that too is present in them. Some mystical being giving the main characters another chance, whether intentionally or not, in another world. However, if we continue this theory to the beginning of the cycle, that would mean that we all died in that battle with AFO. The room was deadly quiet as the teen last words left his mouth, mostly shock and astonishment of the possibility of what happened to the group. Mina was the first to speak out. No, there is no way. There's got to be something else. I don't even remember taking a fatal hit. She shook her head in frustration. There's no way I would kick the bucket that easily without at least hitting back. That would be so unmanly, Kirishima said additionally. This began a wave of dismissal of the idea from the class, as none remembered taking a fatal blow, or even being close to dead. The talks momentarily halted when Ojiro came back from his questioning and escorted the last classmate to be questioned, Toru, to the designated area. After a funny moment of surprise from Sich not realizing the girl was there, he offered to get her some clothes if she would give him her size in shirt and pants. As they continued inside the office, Ojiro came back to the room with his friends, which was silent again, with everyone having serious faces. After being caught up to the conversation, his face darkened in understanding of the possibility that they all might have died, and inwardly cursed his powerlessness. I don't think we died. AFO's entire purpose was to take back OFA. He wouldn't just kill me like that. He was trying to capture me, if anything. Think about it. If he wanted to just kill us, why go through the effort of gathering a group? He could have just used SH Garkai's decay quirk to wipe everyone near UA out in one fell swoop, Midoriya stated. The class brightened at this, giving some hope to their predicament. Is death the only way for that type of genre to begin? Maybe something else could have caused it, Kota shyly asked. I don't know. From the ones I've seen, that was the common denominator, Kaminari, Todoroki answered. I believe there were a couple where death wasn't the cause for it, but they were usually the less popular ones, so I skipped them. The class once again breathed a sigh of relief to the news. They didn't necessarily have to die for this to have occurred, but that still left the question of how did this happen in the first place, and how would they be able to get home from it? Was there any show that had the main character return home? Shoji asked. Kaminari shook his head. I don't know. I'm sure there are, but most of the ones I see don't have that as a possibility. The mood grew cold again. No way back home. Stuck in this other world forever. All their family back home would assume them lost and probably dead from the attack at UA. Midoriya had an even bigger worry that without him AFO could do anything without resistance. He knew the other heroes were strong, but only OFA could defeat AFO. No other quirk was strong enough. He thought back to Blast. Well, in his world no other being could stop him, but here, it seems some are much stronger than the people in their world. Through his ramblings he heard Momo speak up and redirected the flow of the conversation again. That creature wanted us to accept its deal and at least for me destroy all the quirks in our society to stop a dystopian future. That means it could send us back and may be the reason why we were here in the first place. The class nodded in acknowledgement and stated having a similar experience with the creature. Did anyone see anything out of the ordinary during our fight with the villains at the school? Iida asked. All the students thought back to the climatic moment and couldn't think of anything. Just a sudden burst of darkness consuming them. Midoriya spoke. I think it was Kurogiri. During the fight with AFO I saw him next to Aizawa, but after a moment I think I saw a burst of darkness come forth from him. Maybe he accepted this creature's deal. And this was part of it. Toru had come back in from her questioning and sat down with the rest of the group, being informed by Asui on what had transpired in her absence. Bakuo was the one to counter Midoriya this time. Isn't he AFO lackey? Why would he accept a deal that sends his master's greatest target to a place he can't reach? Bakugo raised a good point and the class sat in thought on a possible solution to that, and Uraraka spoke up her thoughts. Maybe it isn't permanent. The only thing they fear that could stop them is Midoriya, and they wanted him out of this, so that they can have everything prepared for him once he gets back. It was a mostly optimistic take. That would give them more hope of potentially going home again and not being stuck here, but had some truth to it. Removing your greatest threat from the equation, even if temporarily, from the board would allow them to move much more freely and openly without being worried. That wouldn't explain why we're here along with him. Round face, and given that Aizawa and Shinso aren't here either, rules out the possibility of just being too close either. Bakugo countered. Ojiro stepped in and said, in any case, if Kurogiri did accept the creature's deal, then it's all on it. Maybe if we can find out its motives, we can find out why it took all of us. What did it show you guys to try and convince you to accept its deal? That question made the room grew uncomfortable, nobody wanting to go first on the torture the creature put them through. But Iida went first, regaling the story of his brother, which would hopefully open up the door for others to tell as well. While the class was discussing the hows and whats of their current situation, they didn't know that they were being watched from another room parallel to theirs. As Sitch walked into this room, he saw Blast leaning against the back wall, watching the students and listening in on their conversation. Did you gain any new information? Sitch asked. No, nothing that we didn't speculate already about them. How did the questions go? Blast replied. As expected, most of the things they said made no sense if we assume they are from our world. Multiple continents, quirks, hero schools, multiple hero agencies, thousands of heroes worldwide. And then there's this. The transparent window soon blacked and displayed two genetic sequences. The one on the left is of a normal being and the one on the right is from one of them, which all of them share. They all have something extra, which was explained to me as a quirk factor which allows their quirks to function without inhibiting the body. A third genetic sequence rose up to join the other two. This is the genetic sequence of the monsters we captured. While containing similar traces of humanity, they're completely different to humans and these children. Which means they are telling the truth. That only leaves the question on what we should do with them. The screen went transparent again, showing the teens inside. Blast sat and digested the information, trying to come up with some plan of action. After a couple of minutes he spoke. You're probably thinking of making them heroes of the association, I presume. Sitch nodded. I don't have a problem with that, but I would like them to be monitored. And not just by some no-names either. The S-Class. This drew some surprise from Sitch as he responded. The S-Class, but all evidence points to them being clear of suspicions. Didn't you also read that boy's memories? How could you still suspect them of being with that creature? We still don't know what that creature is capable of. He could have fabricated all of that to fool us. No doubt it realized that someone had been collecting its cubes and slowly diminishing its influence. It stands to reason he would employ a different tactic to see what's going on. It becomes even more worrisome if these kids did naturally have these powers and they are enhanced further by that creature. They would be the only ones capable of stopping them in that scenario, and if they turn out to really just be kids away from home, they would probably see it as a great opportunity to get stronger. There was a knock on the door of the room. No doubt it was the clothes for the invisible girl. As he was about to open the door, Blast was opening a portal ready to depart. Before he could leave, however, Sitch asked how he was supposed to convince the S-Class of all people to take in students. Blast simply flashed a smile and said that he would find a way. He convinced him to take this whole cube hunt thing seriously after all, and he was just a hero for fun before. With that, Blast left through the portal and Stitch opened the door and took the clothes from the agent, dismissing them back to their station. He continued on to the rec room with the teens and knocked on the door to announce his presence before entering. He presented the clothes to the invisible girl. Toru, he believed, and once she got herself situated, he began to address everyone within the room. Judging from the information you have all provided to me, we have come to the conclusion that you all are telling the truth about your origins and your abilities. However, getting you all home may prove to be difficult. As you all may have come to realize by my line of questioning, there is no place called Japan here, and the planet only contains one continent which has 26 cities, each for a letter in our alphabet. Noticing the grimacing faces, he continued on. However, we will do anything in our power to return you back to your original planet, dimension. And what do you plan on doing with us in the meantime? A boy with explosive blonde hair, Katsuki, he believes. Well, Katsu, Bakugo the teen interrupted him, seemingly getting agitated by the use of the first name he gave. Okay, well, Bakugo, given that you all claim to be heroes, we considered making you all heroes for the association for the remainder of your stay. We could sure use your help as the rate of monster attacks increases. He saw excitement briefly flash through some of their faces, but one teen with glasses raised his hand. He signaled for the teen to proceed. Sir, would we be required to kill monsters or capture another suitable method of duty? Iida asked. Capture and detainment are all possible ways to deal with a monster of threat level tiger or below. Any higher would be considered unwise and nearly impossible, Sitch replied, which seemed to spread a relieved expression from multiple of the students present. Another student raised a hand. This one was the strange mutant type with a bird face. What are these danger levels? You refer to me, Tokoyami asked. Threat levels are how we assign threats to the general public. It allows us to accurately gauge a monster's strength and allows us to dispatch the correct hero or heroes of a given class to dispatch of it. When no other questions were presented, he continued. We will not force your cooperation and understand you may need time to converse about the proposal. So you do not have to answer now. We will have you escorted to guest bedrooms, built-in shower and utilities. We will also ask for your sizes in clothes so you can have a change of clothing. I would ask for all of you to meet back here in the evening to give me your answer. Understood. All of the teens nodded as Sitch clicked a button on his sleeve that notified the staff to come in. 15 men and 5 women in suits came into the room with pads in their hands, handing each student one to give their various sizes and escorting each student to their rooms, each situated next to each other similar to their dorms back at UA. After some time they all got acquainted with their new living space. A couple of hours later fresh clothes were in front of their doors. After showering and throwing on their new clothes the teens sat and thought of the day's events and the choice they had to make tomorrow. The night went by quickly, and as 10 a.m. rolled around the corner all of the teens had made it back into the rec room. Following some light conversation about the style of clothes given to them and some mentions of thankfully the food in this world being digestible to them, Iida had signaled the class to quiet down. He opened with a summary of the situation they're currently in and his thoughts on the question at hand. I will not lie to you all, I'm conflicted on this for several reasons. Number 1. The questionable nature of this association that endorses heroes to kill other beings. Perhaps this may sound naive to them, but killing should be the ultimate last resort. Even from our worst villains we give them a chance of surrender. Number 2. The danger. We don't know what we will be up against here in this world, and without healing quirks any injury we sustain would leave us vulnerable for extended periods of time. Maybe even permanently disable us, which we can't afford, especially with what's going on back home. Which brings me to problem number 3. Getting back home. If our time here is only temporary or a way home is found, it would be best for us to not put ourselves at risk if we don't need to. I have other concerns, but I would like to turn the conversation over to the rest of you. All voices are welcome. Midoriya raised his hand to speak up next. I agree with Iida's assessment. Throwing ourselves into unknown danger seems unwise, and if there are these so-called monsters around just as strong as the individual from yesterday, I can't imagine what that kind of strength in the wrong hands could do. So you're still looking down on us, huh? The abnormally normal sound of Bakugo's voice cut in. Just because you're the strongest now doesn't mean you will remain that way for long. I'm still aiming to be the #1 hero. There ain't nothing I'm afraid. You got that, Midoriya? His eyes drifted over to Todoroki as well. The same goes for you two, half and half. If the monsters are stronger here than the villains we're used to, then that is just the perfect opportunity to practice. Besides, did you guys forget about yesterday already? The heroes are separated into classes, so only the stronger one gets the call to the bigger threats. Bakugo said finally. I agree with Bakugo. However, more concerning to me is how hospitable would the association be if we decided to decline the offer. If they don't have the money to support us, or if they decide that we're just freeloaders and throw us out on the street. Those of us that can't pass off as human could be in serious trouble. If the reaction of that stranger before is universal, those with mutant-type quirks could be hunted down by their heroes and we would be forced to fight them. Not mentioning housing and other needs, Shoji said, causing looks of concern to befall the class. Well, couldn't Momo duplicate money to help us hide out and buy things we need? Ribbit. Asui replied. Momo shook her hands in surprise while shaking her head. No. Even if we're in a different world, that's still illegal where we come from. Besides, I don't even know what the money here looks like, let alone its atomic configuration. They may not even have the same periodic table as us. Oh, I know. What if we got jobs? That way we could just camp out until we have enough money to buy an apartment or something, Toru said, waving her arms in the air rapidly. That would be impossible. We don't have any information in their systems. So we would either be paid very poorly or take probably unethical jobs for decent pay, Tokoyami said. The group sat in silence while people gathered their thoughts together. Semi-balling her hands up, Uraraka went next. I still want to save people, no matter the danger. As long as people are hurt or in trouble, I want to give a helping hand. Uraraka is right. If we didn't help people because the risk was too high, we wouldn't be able to call ourselves heroes, Ojiro said in support. After that, multiple other classmates began to raise their support for joining the Hero Association and becoming full-fledged heroes. Eventually, it was fully decided that they were going to join the association, and in perfect timing as well. By the time the talks had ended and the decision had been made, the time was rapidly approaching 12 p.m. They heard another knock on the door before it opened, showing the same gray-haired man from before, Sitch. So have you all made a decision? The boy with the green hair stood up and said yes. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 3. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Lumpe Spark 3 on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.